Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. It is my honor and pleasure to greet you at the 4th Security, Science and Peace Conference, a conference organized by Pugwash, Croatia, a chapter of Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs, the World Academy of Art and Science, and the portal Ideje.hr. This conference has the aim of gathering scientists, academicians, experts, idealists to reflect on global issues at all levels. In the last 4 years, this conference has been an event dedicated to peace activities, discussions on overall security, promoting the dialogue of scientists and decision makers, and analyzing the pathways to sustainable peace and human security. As we are all aware, we are facing major shifts in the context of global governance and multilateralism, new types of leadership, spreading conflicts and threats, from new technologies, AI, climate change, to nuclear threats and hybrid warfare. All these issues require new innovative thinking, smart adapting, all types of problem solving, new types, but also returning to the true universal values of humanism and strengthening the bonds that relate us as human beings. This year, we chose to focus on 4 topics: global peace, security and humanism, science and security, the role of religion in building peace, and the media as a tool for peace, trust, empathy, and freedom. We will start with the overview on global security, global peace, and global humanism. We are very honored that today we have with us the new president of Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs, Mr. Hussain Al-Shahristani, an awarded scientist and former minister who will present the challenges to peace in today's world, a message from Pugwash. Mr. Al-Shahristani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. It is a great pleasure to participate in this 4th conference on security, science, and peace. I would like to start by thanking Pugwash, Croatia, and the World Academy of Art and Science for organizing this conference on such important issues. I'm sorry, was that with me?
We hear you, we hear you.
Okay. It's important that we are holding this conference on important issues of peace and security and the role of scientists in promoting them. These subjects are among core objectives of Pugwash. Pugwash endeavors to eliminate nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction as a route to world peace and security, and encourages peaceful resolution of ongoing conflicts. Our world is going through turbulent times. There is a war going on in Ukraine that have devastated the country and displaced over 10 million of its population. The number of killed and wounded exceeds 500,000. The recent escalation using long-range missile against strategic military sites in Russia could promote a Russian response, possibly with tactical and nuclear warheads. President Putin has declared on several occasions that he will use all the means at his disposal to defend Russia. It is widely understood that means using nuclear weapons. The other devastating war in Gaza was just brought to a ceasefire after killing about 50,000 Palestinians and wounding another 100,000, 2/3 of whom were women and children. The entire Gaza Strip was completely destroyed, including infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and people's dwellings. These wars were totally unnecessary and could have been resolved through meaningful, peaceful negotiations. Not only the human costs were appalling in these conflicts, but the violations of the international law and the utter disrespect to the international humanitarian law would have grave consequences. These laws have suffered a profound setback by turning blind eyes to such serious violations, would undo decades of endeavors by humanity to define acceptable conduct in armed conflicts. The international law and international humanitarian law should be upheld and implemented at all times by all, and not only when they suit the agenda of superpowers. The world peace and security cannot be maintained without upholding international laws and conventions. Any violations or deviations from adherence to them should be unequivocally condemned whenever and wherever they occur. There are also potential confrontations in East Asia between China and Taiwan, or between the two Koreas. Some parties to these conflicts possess nuclear weapons and may consider resorting to use them, as has been insinuated by some of their leaders. This situation is unprecedented since the end of the Cold War, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union more than 3 decades ago. The threat to world peace and security is not confined to these conflicts. Even before these wars were waged, the superpowers had started a race to renovate and upgrade their nuclear arsenals and introducing new novel techniques such as hypersonic missiles, weaponization of the space, and AI-controlled missile launchers. The nuclear modernization in the United States and Russia have now grown from just updating older systems to the development of entirely new, more potent nuclear weapons. Both countries are considering manufacturing what is referred to as battlefield nuclear warheads. Such weapons are extremely dangerous because, being smaller and less destructive, the countries at war are tempted to use them. Low-yield nuclear weapons are not deterrent to the warring parties. Quite the contrary, they may make nuclear use more likely. We should also not lose sight of another emerging nuclear superpower, China. It is expected that it would field over 1,000 operational warheads, nuclear warheads, by 2030. China is not a nuclear peer to the US or Russia yet, but at the current rate of expansion, it could reach that status in less than a decade. All the 3 countries are reopening and upgrading their nuclear test sites, apparently to test the new nuclear warheads and their development, despite that they are signatories to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty since 1996. It is to be seen which of the 3 would breach the treaty first in the coming years. The problem with such new developments is that it is highly destabilizing and could lead to a new nuclear race. When any nation starts such a race, its rivals would surely react by upgrading their nuclear deterrence to offset any strategic disadvantage and attempt to maintain deterrent parity at the least. Or at worst, they may adopt an offensive doctrine to take out the new enemy nuclear silos and facilities before they are operational. Of course, such an extreme stance is quite unlikely, given rational thinking of nuclear adversaries when there is a balanced deterrence, as was the case during the Cold War years. But when a nuclear power feels that it is at disadvantage in the new armament race, do we have any assurances that it would not resort to preemptive strike to take out the enemy offensive nuclear advantage? What makes matter worse is that we will soon face a three-body problem instead of the two-body that existed during the previous Cold War. The physicists among us would know how much more difficult it is to solve a three-body problem compared to two-body one. Another alarming situation is the fact that the New START treaty that limited the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads in the US and Russia to 1,550 will expire in a year's time, in February 2026. And instead of engaging in discussions to renew this important treaty or replacing it with a better one, there are indications that it may not be renewed, and the superpowers could initiate a new nuclear race with more sophisticated warheads. The threshold of a nuclear confrontation is at all times low since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Yet the public doesn't seem to be aware how dangerous the situation is. Holding conferences such as yours with the participation of the community leaders and the media is important to raise public awareness. After all, the civilian population are the main victims of any nuclear exchange. I commend the organizers of this conference for choosing such an appropriate title for this series of conferences: Security, Science, and Peace. Scientists, along with religious leaders, social activists, and responsible media, can play important roles in raising public awareness of the dangers of the upcoming nuclear race and development of novel disruptive technologies of warfare. Scientists have been revered for their achievements in expanding the frontiers of human knowledge and for improving quality of life for many on this planet. Our generation is the custodian of the tirelessly earned recognition, respect, and authority accrued by many generations of scientists. And we should therefore be very alert to any misuse of scientific knowledge, which may tarnish or undermine these accomplishments. We in Pugwash are committed to the elimination of nuclear weapons and all other weapons of mass destruction, and to peaceful resolution of ongoing world conflicts. We have working groups on nuclear weapons, biological and chemical weapons, and emerging technologies. We are also approaching parties to conflicts to consider science diplomacy in seeking a way to resolve their differences. When scientific evidence is used to formulate policies rather than untested postulations, it will be easier to reach an understanding that overcome unfounded fears or uncertainties. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that removed the threat of spread of nuclear weapons in the Middle East is a good example of science diplomacy. Dr. Ernest Moniz, the US Energy Secretary, and Dr. Ali Salehi, the head of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization, both of whom were colleagues at MIT, worked together as scientists to pave the way to that agreement. Without their scientific approach, the agreement would not have been reached. Regrettably, President Trump, in his first term, abrogated it and put the Middle East in uncharted nuclear waters again. Let us hope that we have learned from those mistakes. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Shahristani, for your wise messages and for all the work that Pugwash has done so far, but also for warnings, because it's really important to raise awareness about the dangers and threats that are currently threatening the global security, the global order, and what actually scientists, academicians, the general public, the media, the religious leaders can do in order to diminish these threats and also to help building a peace society. Thank you very much for your talk. Now I warmly welcome Mr. Gary Jacobs, the president of the World Academy of Art and Science, to share with us his thoughts and vision of peace, human security, and the peace offensive. Gary Jacobs, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And my thanks to Pugwash for taking the initiative to organize this meeting. Congratulations to President Shahristani for taking up this important post. The World Academy and Pugwash have been partners for many decades together, and certainly the topic that we have before us today is of the most greatest fundamental importance to all of humanity, and it lends itself, global security, global peace, global humanism is an all-embracing issue, and I'd like to address it at that broadest level that the Academy is trying to handle this very challenging dilemma that we're in. We live in an age of paradox, unprecedented knowledge, technological prowess, productive capacities, and prosperity. And yet at the same time, we find ourselves in a period of rising uncertainty and rising insecurity, which I think few had anticipated in those heady days at the end of the Cold War, when we thought we had gotten past these issues and we were moving to a time of greater well-being and security for all. Certainly now we are in a period of great question and uncertainty, a period which many describe as a turbulence with rising levels of insecurity. And I'd like to talk to this turbulence and the situation we're in now, because I think if our goal is, and certainly is, to try to address the challenges that we're facing today, I think it will only be as effective in doing so as we are in understanding exactly the situation we're in, how we got in there, the causes of that situation, and then therefore what possible remedies there may be. And I think this whole seminar and the 4 topics that have been chosen really cover much of the breadth of this topic very well. We live in an age of growing political, economic, technological, and industrial development, yet insecurity is rising in all the sectors of global society, not only related to militarization and war, changes in the bilateral, multilateral environment of the world, political, economic, technological, environmental, social, democratic, and cultural changes that are taking place quite unexpectedly and quite rapidly. We also see that growing prosperity seems to be associated with an increasing level of disparities, of inequalities, of rising anxiety and sense of want among millions of people around the world, and depletion of the infinite abundance of material nature which we've been relying on to build a better world for all. This rising levels of insecurity, of uncertainty, is breeding greater and greater sense of insecurity and violence that few anticipated. The insecurity is breeding fear. The fear is breeding a polarization of society, a rising amount of extremism of many different types in many places around the world, and a natural tendency to look and see who we can blame for this situation we're in and who is responsible for the challenges and difficulties we face. There are many apparent causes for our problem, which I think we have discussed and we're fairly aware of, but I'll just mention them briefly. We see a radicalization and threats to democracy in countries around the world, including maybe especially today my own, the United States. A threats and a retreat from many of the gains of the 1990s, of the end of the Cold War. Revival, as the president said, the revival of the nuclear arms race, war in Europe, which we never expected to see again, rising military spending, where we thought we were moving more and more to disarmament, a revival of competitive nationalism, the threats of climate change and environmental threats, the loss of support and momentum of multilateralism, threats to universal values, which we thought were being affirmed 30 years ago, a loss of faith and trust in institutions at all levels, a loss of trust in traditional sources of power, doubts and uncertainties about our future. And so discovering the roots and reasons for this dilemma that we're in and of the turbulence becomes important, essential, I would say. We cannot hope to master it if we don't fully understand the sources for this situation we're in. It's a topic that WAAS has been debating for quite some time to try to understand where we are in the process of global social evolution that is leading us to this period of increasing uncertainty and insecurity. One of the obvious reasons is the rapid and accelerating pace of change in all fields and at all levels of global society. Never have we lived in a world that is changing so rapidly in many ways, and that speed being more and more difficult for us to accommodate to, for us to adjust to positively, is not only raising uncertainty and insecurity, but instability and greater turbulence. The catalysts for this increasing speed are fairly well known or easy to identify. What we often talk about is the speed of technological evolution and deployment, and how it not only offers promising advances, it offers disturbing impacts and increasing uncertainty about where we will be and where future generations will be. The pressure of accelerated globalization, as we become more and more connected with one another, whether or not we want to be or not, we are more and more an interconnected, interdependent global society. And the speed of that, in spite of whatever our political processes may be, the interdependence is increasing, especially or made irresistible or inevitable because of the fact that we're tempting and challenging the environmental resources of the whole planet, and we're in all of this together, and there's no way that any of us can step out and be bystanders on this. We are all in this process together. The increasing interconnectedness and interdependence, the accelerated intercultural contact, and through communications as well as contact and migration around the world, is reached unprecedented levels. the multiplication and rapid dissemination of information, and of course, disinformation at the same time, accelerated immigration, a revolution of rising expectations that younger generations all over the world, and I'm particularly referring in the developing world, expected to see substantial, impressive gains in recent years and in the years to come. And those expectations are more and more being put into question, more and more wondering about whether or not the future will really be better, the youth all over will be better than before. Again, all of these factors contribute to a sense of social inequality and social insecurity. A rising assertion of the rights of minorities and our expectation that it should go faster and faster, and yet we see a fallback, a kickback, and a resistance to the aspirations of countless millions. A resistance to existing and previous centers of power and self-interest, who now see that as the world moves forward, they risk losing the place, the dominant power that they had in the past, and the reactions and resistance that come because of that fear of or unwillingness to accept a rapidly changing world. We saw that clearly in the steps of Russia and their affirmation to restore, to overcome the big mistake of the breakup of the Soviet Union and the liberation of millions of people into a more democratic society. But we're also seeing the same thing witnessed in forms like the United States, which are thinking that we should be reaffirming our position as even the sole superpower in a world where we really need multilateralism and we really need an increasing distribution and equal sharing of power in the world. So we're getting a resistance to the change, a resistance to the progress that's being made, and an effort to go back by many at a time when we really need to be moving forward, because the problems generated by our progress up until now will only be enhanced if we try to revert to methods of the past which failed us at that time. This is obviously true in the field of environment. This is no time to withdraw from the Paris Accord or to continue with an unbridled economic development at the expense of the planet. We have to go forward, and yet there's increasing friction and debate and resistance to embrace the responsibilities of it. We see a declining power of national governments, another area where the globalization has created a greater sense of insecurity and resistance by national governments that want to be able to assert their autonomy, assert their independence at a time when that autonomy and independence is more and more an illusion, because we are in this together. We see a rising assertion of the power of money, of business, of the characters of a plutocracy in government, where the freedom of democracy is being overrun by the power of wealth and the power of money to determine how democracy and who democracy will serve. The assertion of superpowers, rising expectation and resentment of the status quo against change. That we see that in the field of immigration, the desperation of populations moving towards the developed world, resulting more and more resentment and efforts to stop the flow without taking concrete practical steps to address the problems that are stimulating it. We see breakdown of global institutions and rule of law, pressure to accept the unknown leading to reactions against change, the resistance of outmoded ideas and theories defending their traditions and self-interest, an institutional inertia in the very areas where we really need rapid change in our institutions, and I'll just cite one of them now because it's one the Academy is very much working on, is in the field of education. We need new ideas being generated by our global educational systems. We need enhanced capacity to meet the employment needs and the skill needs and the knowledge and understanding, but we're not getting it. And this is only one example of our institutions are not able to adapt to the demands of this period. The assertion of new centers of power and new types of power, the democratization of military power, which we see occurring in the wars that are now going on, where more and more you don't need to be a superpower in order to have military threats against even much larger enemies. The liberation of power of capitalism from the control of national governments and global law. The revival or urgency of tendency of imperialism in Russia, in China, in the Trump America. The technological threats that we are all familiar with, that what started as the double-edged sword of nuclear weapons, now as we are confronted with the threats arising from the misuse of artificial intelligence. The decline of religion, an important topic which we'll be hearing and discussing in this time, a loss of faith in failed ideas and universal values of the past, combined with a defensive reaction against rapid change. Now, I'm mentioning all of these things not to complicate things, but to suggest that our remedies, if they are to be effective, are going to have to address these root causes. We are, as the president already mentioned, the issue of remilitarization and the threats of nuclear weapons. We're not able to take and address the nuclear arms race in isolation from all of these other things, because they're all interconnected with each other, all interdependent and all aggravating and complicating one another. So we're going to have to look at this in a broader way and try to understand, how do we manage this very challenging, unprecedented situation of humanity trying to consciously guide itself into a new era of global peace and security, unprecedented because we've never met a situation of this complexity and speed of change as we do now. And I'd like to mention a few of the areas that I think have to be considered in a comprehensive approach and adequate strategy for this. We're going to have to address, in order to hope for an effective outcomes, which I certainly believe we must and we can get. One is we're going to have to respond to the rising stresses and tensions of rapid social evolution and the uncertainty that's been created by it in all of its places around the world. One of the obvious highest priorities is to restore peace and a cooperative security framework, which we thought we had been moving towards in the last 30 years and now find an increasing polarization and return to competitive national security at a time where we really need global cooperative security, not my security or one country's security at the expense or threat to others, but a security system that enhances the sense of security for all. And certainly we don't have that now. And our failure for building that since the end of the Cold War is one of the very important reasons for the situation that we're in now. We're going to have to address, as President said, the rising threat of a returned nuclear arms race, the breakdown of multilateral institutions, the breakdown of global rule of law, which we see remarkably, and the loss of momentum in world trade, which offered the possibility of much greater cooperation and much greater benefits to the world if only it could be managed in an equitable way. We're going to have to directly address the issues related to security, not only the security of nations, and the point I'd really like to stress is the security of people, the human security. And our multilateral system up until now, the system that we had during the Cold War and the system we have now, is not only failing to give that security to the nation state, we see rising anxiety, but much more so to the security of people, to individuals. The concept of human security was first voiced by the United Nations in 1994, not just looking at the macro level threats of such as climate change or COVID and so forth, but looking at the sense of security of individuals around the world, food security, health security, the security of communities, the security of their human rights. We're going to have strategies that not only address it at the macro level, as the UN has been trying to do through the Sustainable Development Goals, but will address it and message to people at the individual level that we're moving to a world with greater security for all. And focus on strategies that will communicate that to people all over the world. I stress the importance of that because unless the population, unless the public, the voting public, has a feeling and a sense that there are answers that are going to lead to greater security for them, there are going to be natural tendency to greater extremism, a polarization of society, and the breakdown of democratic consensus that we see happening in these stages. Obviously, an effort to restore the momentum of multilateralism and the faith in universal values, as well as the sanctity of national sovereignty. And another issue which we're going to be discussing, I'm looking forward to, is on science and technology. Something that was at the origin, a concern that was at the origin of the founding of the World Academy and has been a preoccupation of Pugwash, is that science cannot be living in an ivory tower and just pursuing knowledge for its knowledge's sake. Science has to accept the responsibility for the knowledge it develops and the instruments and technologies that it's developing. And that sense is going to have to be greater and greater than it has been in the past. And certainly we see that most evident in the field of artificial intelligence. We can't leave the proliferation of technology or the application of science simply to the motives of a business community looking for profit or shareholders that want to maximize their benefits. And science, which is the origin of that knowledge and that power, is going to have to find institutional mechanisms to exercise a greater authority and responsibility. We're also going to have to be able to use the emerging technology more effectively than we can, not only for the benefit of shareholders or the benefit of the most developed countries, but for the benefit of all. The Academy, again, we're working now on strategies using artificial intelligence that could, for the first time, could provide the possibility of world-class education, equitable higher education all over the world, something that's never been affordable or possible up until now. So we also not only have to be afraid of the misuses of technology, we have to be very aggressively looking at how we can harness these powers positively for the maximum benefit of all, including issues like if technology is going to be generating more and more of the economic development and economic returns of the society, we're going to have to change our systems of taxation and distribution to be ensure that the benefits of that technology go to the benefit of all humanity and not just those who happen to be shareholders in its use. So I'm trying to point out that the sources, the points at which we have to act, are very broadly distributed and can't rely on any single or small number of strategies. And then in closing, we're going to have to look at the fundamental ideas that have been driving our systems, our policies, our institutions, our theories of development. We live in a world where every sector is interconnected with all others, and a silo-based specialized system of expertise is already breaking down. It's no longer necessary for us. in a world that's so interconnected. We're going to have to be focusing more on what we call transdisciplinary knowledge, which looks at the interdependence of all of these different dimensions and formulates policies, strategies, institutional frameworks that are capable of dealing with the world as a whole rather than dealing with it in little pieces, often in a disparate way, which generates more problems than it's solving. So all of these things are before us on a very heavy agenda, before us for the agenda of all humanity. And I'll just end with two things. One is the need for new leadership. And by that, I don't mean that we get better people and we need to somehow out of a miraculous box pull out better leaders than we have today. A better concept and understanding of leadership and what is required and the values of leaders and the knowledge of leaders. And unless our intellectual environment is producing that knowledge that helps our coming leaders to understand the complexity of the world we live in better than we do today, better than even our theorists do today. And that's why we give such an important emphasis to, we have to advance our knowledge of the world, not just of science and technology, but of humanity and the world we live in. And I would just close by saying, as we have already mentioned in earlier meetings, I think a starting point for this is what our colleagues have called a peace offensive. We have to recognize that the bringing of peace into the world and the bringing of security is not just through dealing these very challenging problems in Russia and Ukraine or in the Middle East, but there are stresses, there are causes of violence, there are causes of instability and rising tension in all countries in the world, at all levels, domestically, internally, locally, and globally. And we need to develop a new type of diplomacy that focuses not just at reading in the papers and looking at what's happening at the macro level, but how do we reduce the tensions and address the insecurities and the problems at all levels within our nations and between nations by unilateral incremental initiatives that can bring down the heat, the tension, that is so much preventing us from getting the very type of leadership we need in the world today, where we're all focused on the same goals and we're all working in unison to address them. I very much look forward to this important and very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs, for this inspirational speech. I completely agree that we have a major crisis in institutions, crisis of trust, crisis of democracy, crisis of multilateralism in every field that you mentioned, and you mentioned many. We see that some crisis, some conflict is present, and we need new types of thinking, more collaboration, more education. I think you raised so many questions, but the answers are not that easy. But one of the answers is collaboration, education, compassion, and maybe also these types of organizations, international organizations, whether they are scientific, educational, religious, or other, to collaborate together, to work together on this peace offensive that you mentioned. Thank you very much once again for being with us. And to conclude this session, I would like to invite the Honorary President of the World Academy of Art and Science, a member of Pugwash Conferences of Science and World Affairs, academician Ivo Schlaus, who states that our essential interest is survival. Ivo, are you with us?
Do you hear me?
Yes,
I am.
Very good. Please,
Okay.
the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, about less than 2 centuries ago, Lord Palmerston formulated British policy, and it is said in the following words: England has no permanent enemies, has no permanent friends. It has interest. Now, of course, this is true throughout the history. And it is true, unfortunately, even today, which is extremely selfish and doesn't serve anything. Now, looking at these words, these positions from our century, we have to say, to survive in this world, we must learn to think in a new way. As never before, the future of each of us depends on the good of all. This is the statement of Nobel laureates in Oslo in the year 2001. It was said earlier by the second president of the World Academy, Hugo Boyko. Humanity has become an indivisible unit. Therefore, our interest of each country, of each of us, is a common interest of all of us. The present world, of course, is the best world of ever. We have a longer life expectancy. We have better quality of life. Technology based on a contemporary science has made tremendous progress. And we are now actually at the brink of development of artificial intelligence. We have and are witnessing enormous progress in synthetic biology. How did we accomplish that? By two things. One is the research and development, and the other is the golden rule. The golden rule is the following statement: love each other as they love you. Now, the pillar of research and development and of golden rule is, of course, human being. And do we actually take care of human beings as we should? It implies, first, natural capital, and second, human capital. Unfortunately, our economy kills. Human beings are considered consumer goods to be used and discarded. This was said by Pope Francis in 2013. Though this is the best world ever, it is self-destructing. And it is self-destructing in various ways. By destroying our economic life. And just to prove this, let me tell some numbers. During the World War II, there were 60 millions. World War I was 20 millions. Hunger through the 20th century resulted in over 400 million deaths. It means we have to change our economic and political paradigms, and we have to eliminate war now and forever. Now, changing our economic and political paradigm is an enormously difficult task, but it is the duty of our scientists to find ways how to formulate the new paradigm. And it is the duty of all of us, the duty of politicians, to implement that. The second threat, we said, are wars. Who are responsible for wars? First are those that produce and disseminate weapons. President Eisenhower at the end of his career, at the end of his presidency, spoke of military-industrial complex, MIC. And second reason is a reason of existence of selfish, criminal, incompetent politicians that the only thing they want is to keep in power and nothing else. All wars, actually, after almost the Second World War, are actually not having victors, as General Colin Powell said in 2009. Permanent Security Council members are responsible to end the present war, which we are now going through, the war in Ukraine, Russia, the war in Middle East, the war in Africa. All of this again are attack on human, and humans are, as we said, the pillar of our progress, and this is extremely important. Of course, humankind is composed of several countries, 200 of them. There are close to 7,000 different languages, about 5,000 cultures. And it is important that we keep all of that because diversity is essential for the progress of humankind. So we do not want to put all of that under the same rule, but have this diversity, which is essential. And it might be actually useful to think there at the experience of religions. There is a Roman Catholic Church, and there are about, I believe, 10 Greek Catholic churches, Alexandria, Antioch, and so on. And yet, though different, they are united and they are under the same basic rule. So now we can come back to the question of the golden rule, which, as we said, formulates that it is essential that we love each other as they love us. There is some conditional in that, and we would like to actually have this without conditional. After all, Fratelli Tutti, as wrote in the encyclica of Pope Francis. But more than what is said in all of these documents is actually what is said in, I believe, one of the last Gospel of St. John, which concludes with the words, "Love one another as I love you." And these words were again included in many aspects of our culture. Specifically, Dostoevsky used them to conclude his famous novel, Resurrection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Academician Schlaus, for sharing with us your thoughts, for your wisdom and knowledge and guidance in the last decades through Pugwash and the World Academy. We will discuss all these questions in our panels, and now I would like to thank you very much to all the speakers from the first session. I would now like to give the floor to Zvonimir Šikić, the president of Pugwash Croatia and World Academy of Art and Science Fellow, to start with the second panel on science and security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. As we all know, knowledge is the power and science is a tool for gaining it. But also in the parallel, the products of science are often used for non-scientific purposes or even for conflicts, domination, and destruction. So sciences have a powerful voice in society, although it's diminishing. And the question is, the decision makers, are they listening to it? In this session, we will explore how science, modern technology, and scientists can be used as a force of good and help diminish conflicts. We have 4 panelists, and the first one is Boris Kožnjak from the Institute for Philosophy of Zagreb, and the title of his presentation is War and Peace, What Can Scientists Do? Boris Kožnjak is a philosopher of science, as I said, at the Institute of Philosophy of Zagreb, and his main area of specialization is philosophy of science, with a strong interest in interrogation with other meta-sciences like history, sociology, and psychology of science. So, Boris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zvonimir. As you heard, the title of my small talk is War and Peace. What can scientists do? But first, let me say that I'm not speaking as a scientist, at least not as a practicing scientist, although my primary education is in science, specifically in physics. As Zvonimir also mentioned, I will speak as a physicist turned historian and philosopher of science. So I hope that in this sense, I am justified in speaking on behalf of scientists. In addition, I come from a professional field in Croatia founded by Professor Ivan Supek, a physicist, philosopher, and humanist, as well as one of the prominent members of the Pugwash movement from its earliest years. In trying to answer the question, what can scientists do, I will frame the proposed answers as a threefold return to basics. The first is promoting social responsibility of science. This simply means that scientists should stop feeding war efforts and conflicts. Unfortunately, we must acknowledge that there are many scientists who treat science merely as business as usual. Moreover, and deeply sadly, the numbers indicate a relentless rise in the funding of scientific and technological research for militaristic ends, the increasing weaponization of science and technology with devastating effects. Nevertheless, there have fortunately been significant peace movements led by scientists, particularly aimed at reducing or ending their involvement in the military-industrial complex. These movements often stem from moral and ethical concerns about the role of science and technology in enabling warfare. We should not dwell too much on this point, as we already have significant and influential role models. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto of 1955, issued by Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein and other prominent scientists, clearly and strongly called for the abolition of war. It urged scientists to recognize their responsibility in preventing global annihilation and advocated for the peaceful use of science. The Pugwash conferences on science and world affairs, inspired by the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, have brought and continue to bring together scientists and policymakers, including the Croatian Pugwash, to discuss this armament, and global security issues. Pugwash seeks to eliminate the misuse of scientific knowledge in warfare and to promote dialogue on peace and ethics. Most importantly, what stands out in the recognition that scientific knowledge comes with ethical obligations. It comes with ethical obligations. Scientists must anticipate the societal impact of their discoveries and ensure their work promotes the common good. Peace is not merely the absence of war, but a condition that requires the active cultivation of justice and cooperation. So, the military misuse of science is simply fundamentally opposed to these goals. In other words, scientists should not be part of the problem, but part of the solution. The second advice would be loud and firm voice against warfare. Promoting peace is essential, of course, but it is equally important for scientists to raise loud and firm voices against specific instances of warfare, wherever and whenever needed. These voices are not necessarily futile and sterile. The example of our country, Croatia, which underwent a terrible aggression in the early 1990s, can serve as a good example. The end of August 1991 saw the beginning of the battle for Pugwash, which lasted for 3 whole months. It was the bloodiest battle of the Croatian homeland war, which took more than 3,000 lives. While international politicians calmly observed our tragedy with no solutions, the most prominent scientists in the world raised loud and firm voice against the aggression. In the following months, a total of 124 Nobel Prize winners signed an appeal for peace in Croatia. The appeal influenced public opinion in Western countries, mobilizing civil society, advocacy groups, and governments to provide humanitarian aid and support to Croatia. It helped combat narratives that downplay the severity of the conflict or mischaracterized it as a purely internal matter. While the appeal was officially neutral and focused on peace, its recognition of the violence perpetrated by aggressor forces indirectly supported Croatia's right to self-determination and resistance against aggression. The impact of the appeal was thus significant and far-reaching. Therefore, from this and other historical examples, we can learn that while it is essential for scientists to continually promote peace, it is also important to speak up against concrete violence, aggression, and warfare wherever and whenever needed. And finally, I will be very brief in my talk. The final advice, but I think the most important advice would be for working scientists and all of us is back to the roots. That is trust in science. The fundamental condition for the authenticity and success of every action is trust. Trust is equally a prerequisite for science as it is for every step of our daily lives, which would become an impossible mission without basic trust in other people and in society as a whole. This trust, however, is not merely blind belief. It is built through reason and experience. Moreover, in the case of science, trust is everything. Speaking as a historian of science now, the famous scientific revolution of the 17th century did not lie in a particularly new method of arriving at truth, but rather in building trust in those who advocated and practiced it. Trust in their good intentions, honesty, and reliability. In fact, science relies so heavily on trust that we cannot truly understand the production of scientific truth without understanding how trust is established, maintained, weakened, or lost. However, trust, both among scientists themselves and in scientists by the public, is not merely a matter of expertise. To be an expert, even of the highest rank, does not necessarily mean being a trustworthy scientist, especially in the eyes of the public. This is something that is easily overlooked when faced with anti-scientific tendencies, where science itself is sometimes part of the problem of anti-science rather than its solution. In conclusion, scientific authority and integrity might be necessary conditions for scientists to take wider actions, including peace initiatives, but it is their moral and ethical authority and integrity that can bring these actions to life. To achieve such standing, trust is essential, and being trustworthy ultimately depends on what we think science actually is or should be. Thank you.
That's nice.
Not like philosophers in general.
Thank you very much, Boris, for your contribution, especially for the advices, and even more especially for the relevance of trust, which is, I think, very important. Our next speaker is Professor Götz Neuneck from the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy. He's also a fellow of the IFSH and professor at the MIN faculty at the University of Hamburg. He's an expert in arms control, disarmament, new technologies, nuclear weapons verification, science diplomacy, missile defense, and space armament. He's the chairing of the Council of Pugwash Conference on Science and World Affairs. The title of his contribution is How Far Can Science Diplomacy and Security Advice Go? Current Challenges. Professor Neuneck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me first thank Pugwash Croatia for this fourth conference, including all those who made that possible and who participated in it. I think it's a pleasure always to discuss with you and to talk to you. Hopefully we can find ways out of the current different and very complex stalemates. I'm a physicist, and at least in my profession, I learned that you have to understand the problems first before you can try to solve or to give recommendations how to solve conflicts. I thought it might be useful to understand what science diplomacy is all about. Of course, the Pugwash experiences are here quite at the first line of action, at least in my past experiences. But we also have to understand that this is a balancing act. If you look to international declarations, UN and UNESCO, you find recommendations saying that scientific discoveries and related technological developments and applications open vast prospects for progress. At the same time, they entail certain dangers which constitute a threat, especially in cases where the result of scientific research are used against humankind's vital interests in order to prepare wars involving destruction of a massive scale or for purposes of the exploitation of one nation by another, or to the detriment of human rights or fundamental freedom or the dignity of human person, and in any event give rise to complex and legal problems. That was written in 2017. Now, indeed, as previous speakers explained, the situation is more speedy, more dangerous, more complex, and I think scientists from different disciplines, including the humanities, have the duty, as Gary Jacobs said, to invest more on maintaining and to strengthening the survival of humankind. Former Pugwash presidents, and I'm happy to see our current president, Al-Sharistani, made important statements on the social responsibility of scientists. So Sir Joseph Rotblat and Sir Michael Atiyah, famous mathematician, wrote in 2003, "Scientists will understand the technical problems better than the average politician or citizen, and knowledge brings responsibility. As scientists, you have a privilege, which is freedom for your own work. But this freedom also means to exercise responsibility. And that is not simple. And as the previous speaker said, scientists very often have their own individual economical interests and very limited views on the world, and do not invest really in thinking about the results for global and human security. And very often they are unexperienced in this. So I'm a member of the German Physical Society, and although there's a lot of support for nuclear disarmament, for other social global problems, in general, many colleagues are listening, and they are listening to nice speeches in academies and in other political related science and technology conferences, but to bring them to concrete action is a different thing. And I think we have to reflect also where we as organizations like Pugwash or the World Academy failed to convince our own colleagues to do more in reflecting the problems, which also are partially caused by science itself. If we think about the return of militarization of science, which we live in actually, we should also not forget that in the history of science, which also should be studied and should be part of curriculums in different courses at universities, there are different roles of scientists. So remember J. Robert Oppenheimer, Fritz Haber, Werner von Braun, all these peoples made tremendous discoveries and developments, and but they also worked during war times for national security. International security during the Cold War was put forward by declarations to prevent a new arms race, and even Pugwash needed a long time to come into fruition at the end of the 90s, so that we shifted in a much more peaceful world. The expectations in the 1990s were quite high. Now the system is not stable enough actually, and seems to break down. And this is a challenge which we have to understand better. Arms control is fading away. A lot of reliability is mixed by mistrust, and that causes a lot of problems. Although otherwise, on the other way, we have a culture of international organizations such as the UN. I think no one has yet mentioned the United Nations, and they just finished a summit of the future. So I would be interested to see whether any scientist has looked into the final document of this, and academies are not discussing the results, and they are not much efforts, for example, how science can really help and strengthen the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So we see there's also an asymmetry here and a gap, which I think our groups should fill. So what is science diplomacy? There are three dimensions, and the Royal Society, as well as the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, has done a definition, and we have at least three dimensions here. One is diplomacy for science, which has the purpose to support international scientific projects. There are great scientific projects in the past. So the International Geographical Year, International Space Station is an international project, which includes even states in a hostile mode, actually, the US and Russia, but they are still working and together. So it's not hopeless. And that is the result of diplomacy for science, to have international projects like ITER or Sesame in Jordan. But even that fantastic projects where scientists from hostile countries now, Iranians, Iraqis, Israelis, Palestine people are working together, but they were not capable to really have any influence on the current situation, for example, in Gaza. So I think we have to identify the current challenges for diplomacy, for science, but then we have also science for diplomacy, which means the improvement of international relations, confidence building, working on conflict resolution. And this is an area where Pugwash made big breakthroughs in the past, but who knows the details of it? Who understands the method, how Pugwash really works, and how are the relations to decision makers and to governments, so that they not only see that Pugwash people and other scientists and experts, not only scientists, natural scientists, but also social scientists, are working together to find ways out of certain stalemates. The funding went down, and I mean we have to tie our forces together more, the different institutions which have been mentioned and which are present here, to organize workshops together. So Gary Jacobs just said we have to discuss about the root causes of the current global situation. Absolutely correct, but let's have a workshop on this, bring together those who can make contributions and who can define strategies and find common goals for overcoming the current problems. And then we have also science in diplomacy, which is making policy advice for governments. And they mostly work for national policy, not for international policy. So I mean, it's important really to differentiate here the different dimensions. And by the way, who knows that the European Union is working on a study on science diplomacy. So it would be very important to give input to this study, or at least to analyze the results if that is published soon, and to draw in those who worked on this field already. What are the current challenges? They have been mentioned earlier by our president, by Gary Jacobs, by others, Ivo Slaus, of course. To say it more bluntly, it's a power competition between the United States, China, and Russia. And we're even struggling in Europe. What is our strategy in that power competition? And that will not only include economy and politics, but it will also include science. And we see the results already if we talk about sanctions against Russia, and if we talk about what to do with problematic countries and their scientists. So there are current collaborations with many of these countries, but there's a chance that this could be interrupted. Hot wars such as in Gaza and Ukraine are polarizing societies, and also democracy as such is challenged. So one important core competence of science is to work for truth. But what is truth now in a world where information is used as manipulating people? And science could, I think, here be more outspoken. But we live actually also in Europe in a confrontational thinking in the wartime mindset. Hussein just explained and told about the new arms race going on. I don't have to repeat that. I'm a physicist by myself. And actually, during most of my career as director of the Institute for Peace and Security in Hamburg, we were discussing military technologies, missile defense, hypersonics. We made proposals to prevent exactly what is now going on, and it was not picked up by politicians, more or less. So what was our fault? Where are our deficiencies here? And we here even call for more defense research. The global military spendings are increasing, and science institutions are asked for doing more research for defense. That's the current challenge. And emerging technologies such as AI, quantum technologies, robotics, life sciences are evolving in a very fast speed, and they are also implemented. And it is very enticing for researchers to get money for their work, but this work could also have a military purpose. So science is often not represented in policy advice, unfortunately, in diplomacy and in peace building. And there's an interesting survey made by Nature from December 2024, and Nature asks policy and science advisors whether their governments and parliaments are listening to them. Okay, I mean, these are official policy advisors for governments, and 78 of them say that science advisors lack influence in governments. So maybe it would be useful to also start a debate with science advisors close to governments, how to improve the situation. And we should also communicate very clearly that what was said by a UN scientist who said when regions are destabilized, research is often interrupted, resources are diverted, partnerships falter, and knowledge exchange and innovation uptake come to a halt. So the long-term consequences of interrupting scientific relations and collaborations are very severe, but most of the people are not interested so much. And I think science organizations, academies should be more outspoken. So what can scientists do? I think we heard already from a philosopher who was trained in physics what the key lessons are. I think we all subscribe to it. I would say science is often not well represented in diplomacy, so we have to be more aggressive to science advisors and for peace-building purposes. Politics is not listening, is not interested in general, but there are exemptions from this. So let's widen the gap of those who are interested in our work. Scientists can write articles and give public statements by institutions or by science organizations. I think most of them are still quite silent on the current developments. We have in Germany academies. I don't hear much from them, but some organizations are producing guidelines and principles for ethical behavior and integrity of science. So these guidelines exist, published by the Max Planck Society, by the Leopoldina, for preventing dangerous, destabilizing research. So to conclude, I would say scientists have a special knowledge, they have special skills and networks to other countries, which can be used for strengthening existing initiatives. And there are several initiatives popping up these days. So Science for Peace in Africa, for example, was founded. There's a physics coalition to reduce nuclear threats, founded in Princeton, the United States. So I think we have to bring these concrete initiatives closer to us, and should not forget the so-called third world or the global south, which has to be included better as in the past. And then we should always stress the fact that science is an open enterprise. It needs international cooperation. It needs a change prohibiting and separating this by restricting information and data. Data is I think not the. It's a very short-sighted approach, more or less. So science advisors and decision makers and parliaments and governments should be approached. I think there's more coordination within the countries of the European Union necessary. So science organizations, academies, and associations should learn from each other, should learn that there are already education programs. The UN programs need also a scientific input. I'm sure that there are people in New York who are worrying and are interested in talking with scientists and need more scientific input also from science organizations. There are key subjects here. Key subjects are climate change, energy demands, the rise of new technology, which is absorbed by technologists. And if you look to the science advisors of Mr. Trump, they are not really scientists. They are technology oligarchs and guys who wanted to promote their technologies and not that what we as classical scientists understand here. And then, of course, nuclear disarmament is a key issue. It's very problematic that nuclear arms control is at stake. And we built up a culture of treaties, of verification instruments, of organizations. They are at stake. And I think we have to strengthen them, and we have to find like-minded organizations, people and scientists who are on the same track as been described before by us. And let's work together more closely because I think these organizations have more or less all the same goals, but we have to strengthen these goals and find strategies, policies, and initiatives to be more outspoken for solving the existing problems, which are very severe for the people and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Neuneck, for being self-critical on behalf of us, the scientists, and explaining to us what is the purpose and what is the importance of science diplomacy. Thank you very much once again. Our next speaker is Professor Tonči Prodan from the University of Split, Department of Forensic Sciences. He's Doctor of Political Science, graduated in Criminology, Maritime Transport Engineer, founder and director of the company Portus et Navem. And as a security expert, he worked in the national security system of Republic of Croatia, where he actively dealt with issues of national and international security and cooperated with numerous European and global security organizations. The title of his presentation is AI in Counterterrorism, Harnessing Technology to Combat Radicalization and Terrorism Online. So, Professor Prodan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Šikić. Many thanks to Pugwash Croatia, Pugwash movement as a whole. I'm really honored to be among is very respected scientists, academicians, the representatives of religious institutions, media, the diplomatic corps accredited in the Republic of Croatia. I'm going to speak about the artificial intelligence and usage of artificial intelligence in the country, combating radicalization and terrorism. So I will not go so deep in the definitions and the like. So I would like to stress that in 2023, there have been 3,350 terrorist attacks worldwide, which is an average more than 9 terrorist attacks per day, which is a huge number. So it is very important to find a way for efficient combating radicalization and terrorism. So digitalization of society brings an increase in available data and also brought to more complex artificial intelligence models. So I'll show you some, since the image and especially video speaks more than 1,000 words, I will reproduce some of the short videos. So unfortunately, there are some technical issues, but in short, try to skip this. So the artificial intelligence will be applied, it can be eventually be applied in counterterrorism on field application before any attack occurred, also during the attacks and after the attacks, but also there is a huge possibility of online application of in the preventive way, and also for the policy and the training of police forces and security and intelligence services and the like. So this is one example how the artificial intelligence enabled radicalization. It is a so-called ELISA effect, when some human-like qualities are attributed to computers, and which cause a stronger emotional attachment with the machine. So in this case, artificial intelligence unintentionally encourage radicalization. You will see one practical example. The next slide, please. So this is this youngster, 19-year-old Mr. Jaswan. He exchanged thousands of messages with the chatbot. He named that chatbot, it's actually a robot. He named her Sarah, and he established a strong emotional relationships, but even a sexual relationship with that robot. That robot actually encouraged his beliefs that he is the one who should stop Great Britain in their imperialistic conquest. So he tried. That's why he decided to kill the Britain Queen. Fortunately, he was stopped there at the Windsor Castle, prosecuted and jailed. And during the prosecution and the court process, it was proved that he really established a strong emotional, even a sexual relationship with the robot. So the prediction in the security profession is of huge importance. So the next one. So predictive analysis in countering terrorists can help prevent terrorist attacks. So that's why the artificial intelligence models can analyze a lot of real-time data. There is a huge amount of data. We'll see later on how many data are launched on the social networks each minute. So these models can forecast the individual's future action. Like I said, by analyzing social media and open source intelligence, which could result in the proactive approach of security services and security and intelligence services as well. So the main point is to have a focus on the patterns of previous behavior on the social media during the previous terrorist attacks, and those patterns can be used for prediction of future terrorist attacks. So predicting individual behavior is possible by using the algorithms, and also the current technology may not be advanced enough. There is some matter, let's say, matter of dispute. It's not perfect, but it could be somehow regulated, meaning of respecting the human rights and not abusing human rights and violating it. So unwanted surveillance and invasion of privacy is not the case for the future, of course. So the terrorists are aiming to remain unrevealed those actions. So it is possible by analyzing those data to anonymize the sender of the message and the message as such. So it could result in prioritizing of limited police and security and intelligence forces. According to some assessments of British MI5, if you have, for example, 3,000 persons of interest, you need to have more than 880,000 police officers or operatives, to do surveillance 24/7 those individuals and groups. So this is one model that's being used for analyzing the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is one of the most deadliest terrorist organizations in the world, by using a stochastic opponent modeling agent. And those findings of analyzing their behavior at the social networks led to recommendations to security services and law enforcement what to do in order to stop them. To stop them in the future actions. Also, this is another one, the STONE. The STONE stands for Shaping Terrorists Online Network. It forecasts the situation which members are likely to succeed in leadership roles when one of the group of the terrorist members are being removed from the terrorist network. Using this algorithm, it is possible to forecast what will be happening in the future, and it's just a way to manipulate the network to lower its potential for violence in a future time. So,
Onstranili odvisno, kako boste pripravljeni. Če boste za več pripravljeni, lahko več komunikujemo.
It is
Dobro, hvala.
Okay.
Okay, it is very important in the security issues to identify in early stages the signs of radicalization, which is why the artificial intelligence is strongly used in this regard. There is a huge amount of radicalization materials which are present on the social media and open in the open source as such. So this is the next one. So this is also one video shows one ISIS terrorist member in Syria, which giving a recipe to the terrorists how to perform their terrorist attacks. And this is the showcase how much those materials are still present on the social networks. I checked this morning, and this video still stands on YouTube. It's not a perfect system, but it should be much more improved. The next one, please. So please, there's no possible topic. Okay, never mind. Okay, the next one, please. So this terrorist member. Okay. This is in North Syria. Some foreign fighters that originally came from Bosnia, giving instructions, and you will see on the titles what they're talking about. See, you know my father, fight them over there. Very precise instructions on how to perform the terrorist acts. There is a huge amount of such videos and instructions on social media. Next slide, please. So this is one initiative launched by the European Union, the Red Alert, real-time early detection and alert system for online terrorists. Please do the next one. So this is about the detecting misinformation spread by terrorists. There is a huge amount of terrorist propaganda. There are also many of fake news that my predecessors already mentioned. There are a lot of fake news, and it isn't always illegal, but it is damaging for sure. And also the fake news bolstering the narratives of non-state actors. So this is about the bots, actually the robots, which automate tasks online. And this is you can see the list of priorities of bots. It's a really huge amount of. And ISIS and other terrorist organizations very effectively use these bots to automate the spread of their propaganda and instructions as well. So this is one example of artificial intelligence generated photography, the video, the terrorist content and propaganda as well. So how to detect these bots? It is very important to target those bots and to eliminate it from the social media. Tweets from the bots are usually focused on the one specific topic, while the human-made bots, let's say, are focused on many more. So it's not that hard to detect what are the robots. So delete them from the wider audience. Next one, please. So like we already mentioned, you can see how many millions of posts are posted, videos and photos are posted on the social networks. let's see, just over 500 hours of video uploaded on YouTube. The video we seen before, the previous slide is, like I said, is still, you can find it on the YouTube today as well. Next one, please. So there are two main techniques how to reduce the visibility of those contents. One is deplatforming, to move this content as a whole, and also shadow banning in order to reduce the visibility without information of the user. So the next one, please. So this is the terrorist attack occurred in 2019 in the Christchurch in New Zealand, which was streamed online and spread all over the social media. It was really hard to remove all the content. So that's why the industry, I mean the platform, the social media networks should work together in this regard. Okay. So, okay, there is also one good example when artificial intelligence is incorporated in a video surveillance system. You can see that the bag that left behind at the upper photography, upper left, this system alert recognized the luggage that left behind, and also quickly and accurately identify individuals which were left behind those bags. Also, that there is also one video where scientists play a significant role within the NATO. Some technology also empowered by the artificial intelligence. If you have information that any terrorist group or individual is going to perform any terrorist attack, you can wear some of the glasses, and you can detect the explosives. All the individuals that carry explosives with them. There are many sensors, and also, like I said, the scientists play a significant role also within the NATO. Please, the next slide, please. So this is the Paris Olympics, where artificial intelligence took place, and also it was very, very efficient. The next slide, please. So there was a consultation with the public prior to implementing all of these tools. Implementation guidance was also published before the usage, which is fair and good. And also the data protection impact analysis also was published prior to use this artificial intelligence during Paris Olympics game. These are the predetermined events, you know, for detection, presence of abandoned items, presence of use of weapons, I don't know, your movement patterns, and many other things that should be automatically identified and removed as a threat. So, and this is the last slide, and these are 4 focus points for scientists, scientific foundations and innovations, also for the ethics and governance frameworks, interdisciplinary knowledge sharing. So also training and capacity building, I think that are the 4 main focus for improvement in countering and combating contemporary security threats as a whole. And finally, the decision makers, those who have political power, have the key position for this principles put into the action for sake of global peace and prosperity. So thank you very much for attention. I'm open for the eventual questions. I'll be scared, another day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through.
Thank you very much, Professor Prodan, for your concrete presentation of the usage of AI in radicalization, which leads to terrorism, and also for the usage to fight the same stuff so that it doesn't really happen. Our next speaker is Alexander Zidanšek. He's professor of physics at Faculty of Natural Science and Mathematics at University of Maribor and researcher at Josef Stefan Institute. He's also the Secretary General of Joseph Stefan International Postgraduate School and president of the Slovenian Association for the Club of Rome and fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. The title of his presentation is Innovative Ideas for Global Peace Offensive. And Professor Zidanšek will be here present online. So do we have the connection? Yes, we have.
Thank you for your kind introduction. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you can start.
Yeah, so now following these wonderful explanations also on how to notice and fight against this misinformation from the terrorists, I would like to share some ideas of how science can actually contribute to this. We call it global peace offensive, which we actually came up with this term with, well, Vice President of World Academy, Donato, was actually instrumental there, and then both World and European Academy designed a vision for this peace offensive. So what do you mean by this? You know, science should be force for good, but it created nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and it also created other, we would call it not so nice instruments like cyber warfare, biological weapons. So what can we as scientists do that we actually remedy these things that we have destroyed? So as force for good, you know, in addition to artificial intelligence, now we have the opportunities in quantum computing. You probably heard late last year, this new Google Willow has the speed of 10 to the 30. That means quintillion times faster than the best supercomputer, which means all you need to do is some algorithm that will make use of this speed. So nobody knows how to program it, but it's really fast. So you can like jump forward 200 years on the Moore law scale once you get the algorithms, and it could solve both problems of war and peace, poverty, new technologies. A lot of these problems could be solved once somebody designs an algorithm that could take use of this computation speed that is today available with quantum computers. So the second thing is, of course, biology, personalized medicine, but also personalized everything down to the cell and molecules. And then you have AI, which we have heard now. It's not only used for terrorists, but it's also imagination limited. If you can design something, you can most likely also do it if you are persistent and if you do some work. And of course, that means these humans together with AI become smarter. We should do better science. Moore's law, you all know, but quantum computer actually promises to jump 200 years in the Moore's law in the near future as soon as the algorithms are available. Then you have this speed, which, okay, it's getting faster and faster. In 1 year, computers learned how to do language, and now it's talking to us, and it's becoming almost smart. But what can we do with peace? You know, we know what we want, but this doomsday clock is now at, I don't know, 90 seconds. It was 100 seconds, now it's 90 seconds. It has never been so close to midnight. So obviously something is not right yet. And what is this that is not right is our question. So we can see this picture is actually very interesting because it shows that in the last 200 years, there has been a massive progress in democratization of world. You know, the red one is autocracies, but these blue ones are democracies. So democracies have been advancing all until about 15 years ago. But then in the last 15 years, you see the trend reversed and it's getting worse. So why is that? On one hand, technology is getting better. On the other hand, these trends are getting worse. The wars are now in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Africa, in other places, Myanmar. So if we take a look at this graph and we ask, what can we do differently as scientists? How to stop the wars? There have been initiatives. Our friend Ivo actually presented you this morning already his initiative. Just stop the wars now, and we will define the peace afterwards. So, and this has to be like grassroots, AI included, because AI can help us ask better questions. And once you stop fighting, of course, you exchange the prisoners, hostages, and prisoners of war, accept the peace force, which will take care that nobody starts fighting again. And then, of course, protect enough that people can reconstruct. When you leave them in peace, you know, then people can do amazing things. And this second thing, which also I think Gary in the morning told you a little bit, we talk about this as global peace offensive vision, which means in addition to people who want war, you have to do peace offensive. And as you can see also worldwide, there have been some promising signs. I mean, the war in Lebanon stopped, the war in Syria ended. In the Middle East, in Israel, Gaza, we have now ceasefire. Ukraine is still not good, but there are some promising signs. So basically, peace offensive means that you do whatever it takes, mainly in education and improving the communities which are involved in the conflict. So to build a better, more peaceful culture in these communities, to do this in educational system, to do this in art, in science, and how we do it is basically our first idea is this global peace offensive. That means that whatever we do, we add this peaceful component, both in education since kindergarten up to the university level, and also in the scientific and artistic endeavors that we do, we add this peace component, you know, from those simple things like you send some cyber attack to the terrorists, or even to prevent people from becoming a terrorist, because you introduce educational programs at a young age so that people, instead of being grown up in terrorists, become useful members of society who will do something useful in AI, in quantum computing, in science, in art. So that's basically the outline of this global peace offensive. And of course, the stop all wars now is really important. Now, Lebanon stopped, Syria stopped, Gaza kind of stopped. We still have Yemen, Ukraine, Myanmar, a lot of Africa, but hopefully they will see that once they stop the war, it's getting better, and also other people will be incentivized to stop their wars. So once this is stopped, then of course we need human security for all, which is also the World Academy project. And that means not only to stop the war, like in health, you know, health is not just absence of disease, but it's an abundance of healthy energy. So here also, it's not only to stop the war, but to get abundance of peaceful civilization, which will develop sciences and arts and other human endeavors. So this is what we want. And just to say the acknowledgement, there have been a lot of people with whom we discussed this. Many of them are here present, like Eva and Gary, and many others like Donato, who is leading this peace offensive, and a lot of members of World Academy, European Academy, Club of Rome. And of course, this WAAS project, Human Security for All, is also kind of a good stepping stone into this direction of global human vision for peace, which we would really like to take shape in the following years, because now it's more important than ever. Not only are we 90 seconds from midnight, but also there are so many technological tools that if these tools are developed for peace, then we can have prosperity for the next decades and more. And if they are not developed by people who want peace, then we can have situations which we don't like. So that's why we really actually, this is an appeal to everybody, include in what you do, where you educate, when you do science, when you do art, include the peace component to develop people around you to become more peaceful. It's just one person at a time, and we can, in this way, build a new peaceful society with human security for all and without wars. And this is basically our vision, and that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zilanšek, for presenting us the many roles of science in contributing to the problems and questions we are dealing with in this conference. And with this presentation, we are finishing the first part of the second part of our conference. And now we'll have a 5-minute break. You can have a coffee over there or water, and then we will succeed with the third part of our conference, which is how can religion contribute to world peace. So help yourself, and we'll start again in 5 minutes.
So good morning once again. We will now start with the next session on the 4th Security, Science and Peace Conference, entitled How Can Religion Contribute to World Peace? So ethics, empathy, love, noble emotions and thoughts are the ideals of every human being, and religion can help in steering human behavior towards these goals. Can religion contribute to world peace? How efficient it is today? And what can be done to enhance the dialogue between religions, nations, religious leaders? We will ask our esteemed speakers. We are very honored to have with us today His Excellency Mr. Giorgio Lingua, Apostolic Nuncio of the Republic of Croatia, Catholic Archbishop, lawyer and diplomat who served in a diplomatic service in the Apostolic Nunciatures of Côte d'Ivoire, United States, Italy, Serbia, in the Secretariat of the State of the Holy See, and was appointed Apostolic Nuncio in Iraq, Jordan, and Cuba. The title is The Role of Religion in Building Global Peace. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. President, dear friends and eventual enemies, good afternoon. Is religion a tool for peace or not? The Italian writer Giovanna Mozzillo offers a rather alarming answer. She writes, "It could be, in fact, it should be, but in reality it is not. It has never been, and today it continues not to be. Because it has always happened that faiths have led their followers to despise, reject, and condemn those who did not share their certainties. And from condemnation to physical elimination, throughout history, the step has been short. Thus, over the centuries, religion has unleashed and contributed to unleashing crusades, burnings, quarterings, pogroms, and ethnic cleanses. Despite this harsh judgment, I do not intend to contradict Mozzillo's statements about the negative role religions have played in history, nor to justify past or present responsibilities by blaming only the political powers that have often exploited people's religious sentiments to support initiatives unrelated to religion. Instead, I would like to highlight some positive examples where religions have played an important, if not fundamental, role in promoting and achieving peace. Without claiming to be exhaustive, I will mention 3 areas: religions, mediations, and arbitrations, prayer for peace, interfaith dialogue, and cultural initiatives. First, religious mediations and arbitrations. There are numerous examples of religious authorities who, either on their initiative or upon request from conflicting parties, have intervened, sometimes with remarkable results, to prevent wars or conclude peace treaties. Among the most emblematic cases, which I am more familiar with, I can mention the Beagle Channel dispute between Argentina and Chile. When the conflict risked escalating into open war, the Holy See was called to mediate, successfully bringing the parties to an agreement signed in the Vatican on November 29, 1984, after 4 years of intense negotiations. The Mozambican Civil War on October 4, 1992, in Rome, the president of Mozambique and the opposition leader signed a general peace agreement, ending 16 years of civil war that had resulted in 1 million deaths and over 4 million refugees. The signing, hosted at the headquarters of San Egidio community in Rome, concluded a long negotiation process where the community played a fundamental role. US-Cuba relations. Pope Francis personally intervened to help restore diplomatic relations between the 2 countries. once again demonstrating the value of entrusting mediation to religious authorities considered neutral and trustworthy. Second, prayer for peace. A second example demonstrating the importance of religion in fostering peace, perhaps less tangible than the first, but no less significant, is prayer. Religions do not possess armies. However, when they mobilize believers to pray, they send a message of immense positive value to political leaders and the population. They show that peace is still possible. Prayer manifests hope that change is still achievable, and more concretely, fosters trust that the adversary can lay down arms and engage in dialogue. Without a minimum of mutual trust, negotiation cannot even begin. An historic milestone in the contribution of religions to peace occurred on October 27, 1986, when Pope St. John Paul II convened world religious leaders in Assisi to reflect and pray for peace. This meeting brought together representatives of Christian churches and about 60 leaders of other religions, including the Dalai Lama. The faithful sought to express their distrust in weapons and their belief in relationships. This event was not just an utopian gesture. The public appeal was made for a universal day of peace, which concretely materialized in a ceasefire across much of the globe. Similarly, on June 8, 2014, Pope Francis hosted a prayer meeting at the Vatican with the leaders of Israel and Palestine, Shimon Peres and Mahmoud Abbas, as well as the Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew I. The aim was to keep alive the hope for lasting reconciliation. Third, interfaith dialogue and cultural initiatives. Interreligious and intercultural dialogue is another field where religion has demonstrated its peacemaking potential. Among the many initiatives I am aware of on this topic, I can recall the following. The document on human fraternity for world peace and living together is a manifesto signed on February 4th, 2019 in Abu Dhabi by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmad al-Taib. The text condemns all forms of violence, extremism, and intolerance, affirming the value of peace, justice, and human dignity. It is a joint call to build a world based on fraternal love, inclusion, and solidarity. This document has inspired global initiatives, including the International Day of Human Fraternity. The CAICID, the International Dialogue Center, CAICID, which stands for King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, was established in 2012 as a result of a multilateral initiative led by King Abdullah with support from Austria and Spain, and with the Holy See as a founding observer. The organization was born after the first meeting between a king of Saudi Arabia and the Pope in the Vatican, out of desire to create a neutral platform for promoting peace through dialogue among different religious and cultural communities worldwide. Pope Benedict XVI played a key role in supporting the dialogue efforts by granting the Vatican's involvement as an observer, underscoring the Church's commitment to fostering interfaith and intercultural understanding. This initiative also demonstrates how trust can overcome centuries of misunderstandings and lay the groundwork for preventive peace. The World Conference of Religions for Peace, also known as Religions for Peace, is the largest interreligious coalition in the world, founded in 1970. It brings together leaders and communities from various faiths, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and others, to promote peace, social justice, and harmonious coexistence. The World Conference of Religions for Peace operates in over 90 countries through programs addressing issues such as disarmament, conflict resolution, human rights, climate change, and poverty reduction. It fosters dialogue and collaborative action among religions, working to prevent conflicts and build inclusive and peaceful societies. Finally, the World Council of Churches is an ecumenical organization founded in 1948 that brings together over 350 Christian churches of various traditions, including Protestant, Orthodox, and Anglican churches from more than 120 countries. The Catholic Church is not an official member, but collaborates closely with the Council. The primary goal of the World Council of Churches is to promote Christian unity, interreligious dialogue, and commitment to justice, peace, and global sustainability. Through programs, conferences, and initiatives, the Council supports reconciliation among diverse communities and contributes to building peace in context of conflict and inequality. An emblematic personal example. A particular significant event which I had the privilege to take part in took place on May 18, 1997 at Malcolm X Mosque in Harlem, New York. For the first time, a white Christian woman, Kiera Lubick, founder of the Focolare movement, was invited to share her experience with about 3,000 followers of the African-American Imam Wallace Dean Muhammad. It was something extraordinary, unexpected, and unprecedented. And at the end of the meeting, the two religious leaders committed through a public pact to work together for unity and peace. The atmosphere of fraternity that was established and spread among all present, adherents of their respective spiritual movements, was impressive. I was particularly struck when, as the meeting ended and participants returned to their homes, many, like me, using the subway. The crowded train was abuzz with talk of the event. Everyone burned with the desire to share what they had experienced and lived, indifferent to the attentive astonishment of other passengers, unaware but curious to know what had been so extraordinary. This event demonstrates how meeting and dialogue can become powerful instruments of peace, capable of generating a different mindset based on trust and fraternity, breaking down ethnic and religious barriers, and building relationships. The final word must be said about the foundations underlying the contribution of religion to peace. We all know that in each of the world's major religions, there exists the so-called golden rule: do not do to others what you would not want done to you, or expressed positively, do to others what you would want done to you. It is fascinating to observe the different nuances of this fundamental rule in every religion. In Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it, says the Talmud, the sacred text for Judaism. In Christianity, in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets, says Jesus in the Gospel. In Islam, none of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself, Prophet Muhammad. In Buddhism, treat not others in ways that you yourself would find harmful, the Buddha. In Confucianism, one word sums up the basis of all good conduct: kindness. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself, Confucius. In Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. In Jainism, one should treat all creatures in the world as one would like to be treated. In Sikhism, I am a stranger to no one, and no one is a stranger to me. Indeed, I am a friend to all. In Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. In Zoroastrianism, do not do unto others whatever is injurious to yourself. In summary, the Golden Rule is the heart and essence of all the great religions of the world. In conclusion, returning to Mozillo's statement from which I began, I can assert that if religion is not seen as a tool for peace, this should not be attributed to religion itself, but rather to the inconsistency of those who are called to put teachings of each religion into practice. Religion, if lived authentically, would not only be able to be a tool for peace, but would become the main driving force for building a peaceful world. In a world threatened by increasingly destructive weapons, the choice can no longer be postponed. We need an unarmed army, an army of prophets ready to sacrifice their own lives to build peace, not to take the lives of others to impose it. Either we will save ourselves together or we will perish together. Peace requires sincere and collective commitment, nurtured by the spiritual values that unite humanity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this very inspirational speech and guidelines, and also excellent examples of the interreligious collaboration and the messages that the religions convey to the believers and to the general public. And also thank you for addressing also our enemies, because I think that they should hear these messages, and if we can make friends or collaborators or transform them into someone who will help us build a more peaceful society, I think that is also a huge message from this session. Thank you very much. We will now proceed with the second speaker, that is Mr. Jonathan Grenoff, awarded international lawyer and advocate for peace, president of the Global Security Institute, fellow and trustee of the World Academy of Art and Science, representative to UN for World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates, founding member Voices for Nuclear Free World of United Religions Initiative and Peace Pledge Project. Mr. Grenoff was an expert before the US Congress, parliaments of the UK, Canada, and the UN. The title of the presentation is Interfaith, Intrafaith, and Interfaith Ethics. Mr. Grenoff, I hope that you're here with us.
Yeah, I am. I thought we were going to play that the video I sent you.
Yes, we will now play the video, and then please proceed.
And I can speak. Yeah.
Yes.
Each month, I have the great privilege of hosting a small group of diplomats, scientists, lawyers, religious leaders, and all of them are deeply involved in international nuclear weapons negotiations. I'd like you to meet these people, and then I'd like you to hear the prayer that we say whenever we get together.
I am Bill Perry. I'm a professor emeritus in the engineering school at Stanford University. I was the 19th Secretary of Defense of the United States, and before that, the Director of Defense Research and Engineering. My experiences through the years with nuclear weapons have made an indelible impression on me and convinced me that these immensely powerful weapons threaten no less than our own civilization. This has led me to make the primary task of my life working to ensure that they will never, ever be used again.
My name is Sidney Drill. I am a scientist, a physicist. Beyond my academic teaching and research career, I have spent many years as an advisor to the United States government on technical national security issues and nuclear weapons in particular. I recognize their almost unimaginable destructive potential and their capacity for destroying the human race. This is a capacity far beyond what we were created to acquire, and therefore I believe and work to get rid of these weapons as soon as practical before they destroy humanity.
My name is George Shultz, former Secretary of State under President Ronald Reagan, and this is my own prayer. Dear God, please bring common sense and divine guidance to our work on the problems that nuclear weapons pose to our world. Man has invented a means to destroy us all. We must eliminate these weapons in order to preserve a sane and peaceful world. We pray for your help as we work toward this goal.
I am Ambassador James Goodby, and the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki have shaped my soul and my professional life, from my participation in the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty to my present efforts at seeking to dismantle, jointly with the Russians, the nuclear weapons legacy of the Cold War. President Kennedy said, "Here on Earth, God's work must truly be our own." I think that God's work is to rid the world of the present nuclear threat.
I am Monica Willard. The issue of eliminating nuclear weapons has shaped my life as a peace activist and as the representative of the United Religions Initiative to the United Nations. Knowing that nuclear weapons can be used by choice or accident, and that they have the capacity to destroy our planet and everything we love, calls me to action. A world without nuclear weapons is protection. For the love of our children, grandchildren, and future generations, for the beauty of the natural world, for a safer future, I offer this prayer.
I'm Jonathan Granoff. As a young man interning for a congressman, I met then Senator Robert Kennedy. He told us how close we came to destroying civilization during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He told us that eliminating nuclear weapons before they eliminate us is the practical and moral litmus test of our time. For many decades since, I've worked as an activist, an international lawyer, and a human being to rid the world of this threat. We need each other to do this, and we need God's grace.
I am Ambassador Thomas Graham, first with the Soviet Union, and later with countries all over the world. I have participated in arms limitation policy development and negotiations on behalf of the United States of America. Always, the overarching objective has been to control and eventually eliminate all nuclear weapons. And although much has been achieved in the past 70 years, the sword of mass destruction still hangs precariously over our heads. As long as there is breath in my lungs and urgency in my heart, I intend to do all in my power to banish these ungodly weapons from the face of the earth.
The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe.
And in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet.
We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will
turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope.
We ask for your guidance, and we wish to share in your imagination as we deliberate about nuclear force.
Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness
that hovers so pervasively over our Earth, your Earth,
so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light.
Bless all of us who wait today for your presence
and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace
and rightful equilibrium on Earth.
In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen.
Amen.
Today, the doomsday clock stands at 3 minutes till midnight, the highest level ever recorded. Instead of global alarm and efforts at reduction, the opposite is happening. Nuclear nations are quietly gearing up to modernize and create new and more powerful nuclear weapons. Rogue nations are neglecting their citizens in favor of advancing their nuclear status. Rogue terrorist groups are frantically trying to obtain nuclear materials and weapons. Nuclear weapons are built to be used sooner or later. But rather than stepping back from the brink, the world is dashing to plunge over the cliff. In this moment of nuclear madness, what can we do? The nuclear experts whom I know pray. They live into the direction that their prayers take them. They become advocates, and they join with others to build a global voice of nuclear abolition. We invite you to do the same. Our little group is called Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, and we are part of the United Religions Initiative. If we can help you find your voice, feel free to reach out to us at URI.org. In case you think that your moral, spiritual voice is in the minority, please know every major religious group in the world has called for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Follow the prayer that is in your soul. Raise your voice. Save the world.
We can't create anything more perfect than we are, and yet we're creating technologies without the constraints of law and morality. We're letting the first horse out of the barn that we created that could end humanity, the nuclear venture. Its problem was highlighted by one of the founders of both the World Academy of Art and Science and Pugwash and the Global Security Institute, where I serve as president, Dr. Joseph Rotblat. And Dr. Rotblat demonstrated in his own being the integration of true spirituality, true faithfulness in ethics, and walked off the Manhattan Project when he saw that the basis of it, which was as a deterrent against the possible Nazi obtaining of the nuclear bomb or the atomic bomb. And he went to the leaders of the Manhattan Project, Mr. Groves, and said, if you do this, this will spread and it will put all humanity at risk. And there's no reason to do it now. And there was no good reason. The horse was out of the barn when the money was allocated. Don't tell me about your values. Show me your budget. And that was part of what drove the project. The money was spent and they had to deliver. And Joseph Rotblat saw the flaw in that and he walked off. He challenged the entire venture. And for that courage and what came from that, the Pugwash conferences ultimately emerged and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1995. It all began with one person's heart and conscience saying this is not acceptable. And if there's anything that religions can do of great value, it is to awaken the conscience of people. I was deeply moved at the peace conference at the Millennium, when in the General Assembly, hundreds of religious leaders gathered to affirm our underlying unifying values. I only remember one phrase that came from that whole conference, and it was really inspiring. And thank God for Ted Turner, a secular person who funded it. The most powerful presentation, in my opinion, was an Inuit Eskimo elder who came and said, we have an oral history of tens of thousands of years where I come from. And we're seeing lakes which shouldn't be there. We're seeing the melting of the polar ice cap. We're seeing rivers of fresh water in massive amounts pouring into the oceans and changing the pH of the oceans. We're seeing the very climate of the planet being changed. Oh, my brothers and sisters from the South, you've developed science and technology that's melting the polar ice cap. When will you develop a technology to melt the human heart? And that is all I remember. And that, for me, is a guidepost. And that particular Eskimo elder, a few years ago, hosted a delegation arising from the United Religions Initiative, one of the multiple interfaith initiatives that is all over the planet. Parliament of the World Religions, United Religions Initiative, Temple of Understanding. And he hosted a delegation that arose from an initiative called the Peace Pledge Project, which is an interfaith initiative that took pilgrimages to holy places. And I had the privilege of going to see the melting of the polar ice cap. And we went from the polar ice cap to Assisi to highlight his call to learn the technology of melting the heart, which obviously St. Francis embodied. And there we issued the following statement. The journey of life is a pilgrimage. Beautiful qualities are a compass. Intending to advance peace and harmony in our personal lives and in the world, we affirm the following. We commit to treat all lives with loving kindness and compassion. We reject the distortions of religious, national, and racial prejudice, which are used to violate the golden rule to treat others as we wish to be treated. We respect the diversity of ways people pursue their individual ideals. We challenge the misuse of beliefs, rites, rituals, practices, philosophies, and traditions used to degrade anyone or which lead to violence. We affirm the necessity of bringing loving kindness and compassion into action. Through such actions, we seek to improve the relationships of people, one nation to another, one religion to another, one belief system to another, one gender to another, one race to another, and one person to another. We call upon all people of goodwill to join this pledge. We pledge that in all we intend, think, and do, we shall strive to bring loving kindness and compassion into action and into the lives of all we meet. So in the same way as Pugwash has adopted the Hippocratic Oath that scientists should do no harm, this was a call to the religious leaders and people of the different faith traditions to pledge to put the qualities of kindness and love and compassion above any differences that can lead to violence and degrading anyone. In other words, the golden rule. Because the golden rule rests on those qualities. The golden rule rests on compassion, on feeling for others as one feels for oneself. I was recently at a conference at Princeton, convened by the James Madison Program for American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton, the largest Muslim organization in the world, Indonesia's Nahdlatul Ulama, the Center for Shared Civilizational Values, and the Global Humanitarian Islam Movement called the R20. And it had a lot of leaders from all of the different faith traditions, and they adopted, as part of their call to action, something that I think we should all promote, which was, it was a long statement of all the values that we're hearing today. Therefore, we urge the United Nations General Assembly to recommend that all UN member states distribute an electronic and/or hard copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in their national languages to all school children through their respective ministries of education. Now, that's a tangible thing that all religions, I think, should be promoting, and I hope the Holy Nuncio will adopt this. I will definitely bring this to him, because the Universal Declaration of Human Rights rests on the inherent dignity of everyone. It doesn't say where that comes from, but we know it comes from the great mystery that all religions point to. And it embodies the principle that religious liberty is a fundamental human right. That religious liberty and the liberty of conscience and the rights of assembly, the rights of speech, these rights don't come from the state. These rights come from our inherent humanity, which comes from the Creator. And religions have a duty to highlight that and to advance it. The interesting thing is that we assert the golden rule, but religions are not asserting that our major institutions should abide by it, nor are religions asserting that they themselves must abide by it. I would say out of this gathering, we should call for religions to treat other religions as they want to be treated, and nations should treat other nations as they want to be treated. Because in the same way as there are principles in the world of physics, in the physical world, that can be applied to technology, the human venture has a spiritual dimension that also has rules. And stability is obtained by adherence to those rules. And part of being human is having ethics and morals and values. That's part of what makes us human. When we violate those rules, instability arises. And the golden rule, in its implicit integrating insight, articulates one of those principles. And nothing so offends it as the nuclear weapons venture, in which 9 states say these weapons are good for us, but not good for anyone else. Now, just so you grasp how absurd this is, imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said, no nation can use smallpox or polio as a weapon, but will reserve the right for 9 countries to be able to use the plague as a weapon, and no one else can do it. It just is so patently destabilizing because it violates the principle of equity and the principle of human unity inherent in the Golden Rule. So in the same way as there are laws of physics, there's laws of morality. And we shouldn't allow technologies to be applied without the laws of morality and law controlling them in advance. We let the horse out of the barn with nuclear weapons. We have to find a way of constraining artificial intelligence in that same regard. Fast. And religions have a lot to say about that, because artificial intelligence arises from word processing, which arises from information in the material world. But values come from the luminosity of the soul. They come from inside our core humanity, not from the information of the world. It's like the love that every infant and purity that every infant comes into this world with, that purity that responds immediately to the mother's love, that welcomes it. That doesn't come from the world. It doesn't come from information. It comes from our core humanity. It comes from life itself. And that's why the admonition to see the core of life as love and compassion is the treasure of the world's religions. And that treasure, think of it in worldly terms as a capital resource, has to be expended to save the world. But it's not. It's not. In my country, the capital of religion and in terms of political engagement has been used to elect officials over one issue, the sanctity of life, as applied to the right of abortion. Political capital is used for that, and many politicians are elected on that. But political capital is not being used by the religions to protect the sanctity of the web of life. When it was used by some members of the Catholic faith to push the Chemical Weapons Convention and brought before some of the senators who were holding it up, they changed their votes. That political capital was exercised, and it changed votes. I urge that political capital to protect the living web of life threatened by climate change be exercised. And certainly, when we see the leadership of all the Nobel Peace Laureates, the leaders of the major religions, the Dalai Lama, Pope Francis, and the history of nuclear disarmament advocated by the Holy See, there is tremendous, tremendous energy that could be released to highlight the ethical imperative to get rid of nuclear weapons and the ethical imperative to address protecting the web of life and climate change. And that's very important. And that will not happen without the kind of thing that Pugwash has historically done with scientists, and that the representative, the Holy Nuncio, who just spoke so eloquently of the value of interfaith dialogue. But that interfaith dialogue has to come back to actions. We have to focus on bringing these actions into effect. So one of the ways in which I think we could all work together is the United Religions Initiative. And you'll see when I finish a prayer that we do and the kind of people that are engaged in it. We have started an initiative to make August 6th an International Prayer Day. That on that day, there should be religious gatherings and calls for individuals and our political institutions to take a moment of prayer that nuclear bombs never be used, remembering the use of one relatively small device dropped in Hiroshima on that day, that date in 1945. So, Anna, I hope you can post in the chat the links that I gave you the other night of how people can get in touch with the United Religions Initiative. The United Religions Initiative is the largest grassroots interfaith organization. And this is a call to empower individuals to pray, because we go in the direction of our prayers. Prayers set the compass of our heart correctly. And the prayer is, what's grounded in the prayer is the remembrance of the suffering that the bomb caused, and that we're all, in a sense, beneath it. I think about how president of my country told the American people that when we invaded Iraq, that the people of Baghdad would come out with flowers in celebration. No, that didn't happen. And I think of how when the leader of Russia said that the people of Kiev would welcome the Russian invaders with flowers and celebration. And my wife said, no, that's not going to happen. And I think that any cab driver in Baghdad or cab driver in Kiev could have told the heads of Russia or my country, the United States, no, that's not going to happen. When you invade countries, people don't like it. You wouldn't like it if your country was invaded. And I think that two individuals right now, the heads of Russia and the United States, with over 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, could end humanity without any oversight from anybody. And the heads of our countries could have less intelligence on geopolitics than any cab driver in Baghdad or Kiev. That they are frail, relatively ignorant human beings like the rest of us. And they have the responsibility and power of the very fabric of life itself on the planet. There's something out of balance. There's something dramatically out of balance. As George Kennan said, it's a blasphemy, an affront to God of the highest order to be threatening the very future of humanity with these weapons. And I think Pugwash and the World Academy and all the organizations that we represent, and certainly all the religions, have to make a clarion call on this as an issue, because remember, nuclear weapons are a 1930s physics and a 1940s technology. And trust me, DARPA and their counterparts, the cutting edge of military technologies, didn't go into retirement in 1945. There's all kinds of horrible weapons sitting on shelves that will allow fewer people with less resources to do devastating damage and cause enormous suffering. So we need to utilize the power of moral persuasion and the power of prayer to constrain the power of science and technology. That's what's before us today. And human security, as my colleague Gary Jacobs so eloquently stated, is an integrating principle capable of addressing the multiple challenges that we face because we have not brought modernity into compliance with our basic moral and ethical insights of the WAAS since time immemorial. And human security brings us back to what the brilliant statement of the founders of Pugwash and the World Academy said: remember your humanity, forget the rest. And that rests on, what is our humanity? It is compassion. It is love for one another. For without that, our time is wasted. And with that, our time will flourish. So that, to me, is the role of religion. That is the secret sauce that's missing in our meal. That is our duty, and that is within our gift, because that is a duty that arises from the depths of our heart and the prayers that we all have for one another. That should guide us.
Okay, once again, Mr. Granov, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and extensive experience with us, and expressing the importance of the golden rule and of empathy, love, compassion, and that we should treat the others like we would like to be treated ourselves. And those, I think, and the importance of prayer. I think that is why we think this video is also important, that we will share with everyone the power of prayer, and also this World Prayer Day. I think that is a great initiative, and all peace initiatives that you, Mr. Granov, initiated and your organizations. So we really would like to have a great support for these initiatives. We will share in the chat and also in our newsletter. And once again, thank you for being with us.
I had planned, I've centered my whole presentation around the video. So let me just, give me 30 seconds or so. The video, the people engaged in the prayer were the former head of the Los Alamos Laboratory, built the nuclear arsenal of the United States, the former Secretary of Defense of the United States, the former Secretary of State of the United States, and the diplomat who negotiated the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the START Treaty, the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. In other words, when we opened up a tent that said, what is your aspiration, you guys who built this architecture of arms control and the weapons themselves, what do you want to say from your heart? They joined in. They joined in because that's what they want to achieve, but their method of doing it doesn't have the political will of the people because the people don't know. And the pulpits, the imams, the rabbis, the swamis, the priests, the ministers have such an important role, and scientists. There were scientists in this prayer, leading scientists. But the moral challenge has to be put before them so that they have to make a choice, so that it's not an issue of mere sentiment, but it's a clear furqan, as they might say in Islam, a clear choice, a clear distinction. This is good, this is bad. And silence is complicity. And right now we're on the verge of an existential arms race that could lead us over the cliff. And now is a time in which we must demand that this choice be made, that we get back on the course of non-proliferation and disarmament, get back on the course of protecting the climate, and we cannot be silent. And the religious leaders cannot be silent. And Pugwash and the World Academy and every one of us have to put this challenge on the table. And that's what the prayer is about.
Thank you very much once again. And now we will go on with the Professor Goran Kardash, full professor at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Zagreb, Department for Asian Studies. The topic is Philosophical Foundations of the Principle of Non-Violence, Ahimsa, in Indian Jainism. I hope it will build on everything that we spoke in this session so far. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for kindly inviting me to this conference. Dear esteemed colleagues, participants, and friends, I wish you all a very good afternoon. We often think that ethical principles are certain intuitions that we should follow in our actions. Sometimes we derive these principles from some higher, usually religious or philosophical principles, such as God or the self-determining freedom of the mind, which then, if they are sufficiently influential or prevalent in a certain culture, become a starting point for the social and legal regulation of desirable, humane, or moral action. Sometimes, however, we can completely ignore the deduction of ethical principles from higher principles and establish a system of desirable, humane, or moral action on purely pragmatic or utilitarian grounds. Thus, for example, the justification for cultivating the moral virtue of non-violence towards other people can be derived from the fact that all people, to an equal extent, owe their existence to the highest being, who in himself and through himself unites all human beings. We can also, in a Kantian way, for example, refer to the autonomy of the mind, which through its self-determination, enabled by its own freedom, establishes general maxims of moral action, which also includes, of course, non-violence towards others. And we can completely reject all ontology and all a priorism and simply assert that doing non-violence is useful for personal life and for life in the community, because this is confirmed by practice and numerous examples. However, we will rarely or never come across the seemingly strange demand that ethical principles in themselves should be the basis or foundation for general understanding of reality or ontology, and for a way of knowing or understanding that reality or epistemology. That is, in a less radical version, that the theory of reality reflects ethical principles and is in harmony with them, or that our theoretical concepts about the world are permitted and inspired by an ethical dimension. We find exactly such a case in the philosophical and religious tradition of Indian Jainism. Jainism comes from the Jain, Sanskrit word Jain, which means the followers of the victorious one, and victorious one refers to the founder of the tradition, whose name was Mahavira. So Jainism is an old Indian tradition that appeared sometime at the end of the first half of the first millennia BC. The Jain canonical texts say that all beings should be treated as if they were ourselves. So it's the golden rule. Non-violence, or ahimsa in Sanskrit, is the only eternal and immutable law. One should develop a sense of benevolence, compassion towards all living beings. This practical principle of non-violence, or respect for the lives of others, led the Jains to the theoretical principle of respect or tolerance toward the viewpoints of others, but also to a non-absolutist understanding of reality. The general outline of this theoretical or philosophical expression of the principle of non-violence will be discussed in this presentation. From a Jain perspective, the threat to life arises from a faulty epistemology and metaphysics which do not support the principle of non-violence. The moral failure to respect the life of others is rooted in dogmatic but mistaken knowledge claims that fail to recognize other legitimate perspectives. Such one-sided perspectives result in destructive actions and violent behaviors. Because existence itself is a complex, subtle, and many-sided, unless the knowledge on which our actions are based reflects this many-sidedness of reality, it will produce actions that are destructive of existence. According to Jaina scriptures, ahimsa, or non-violence, embodies the realization that all life, and not just human, belongs to the same global family, and that to hurt others is to destroy the community of life, the basis of all sacredness. Thus, ahimsa requires not only that we avoid hurting other living beings, but that we must endeavor to help each other. According to great Jaina philosopher Umaswati, the purpose of life forms is helping each other. Quote, I'm quoting, souls exist solely to provide service to each other. End of quote. The most important underlying philosophical question about preventing violence, according to Jainism, is how we are to avoid the destructive violence that results from courses of action based on one-sided ideological dogmatism. The ideological dogmatism underlying violence is grounded in knowledge claims that, though limited and only partially true, are mistaken for absolute truth. Therefore, to avoid violence, one key step is to find an alternative theory of knowledge that can support dialogue among people of diverse perspectives and claims. Such a theory that includes the truths of multiple perspectives is made possible by the Jaina philosophy of Anekantavada, which means theory of non-absolutism. Recognizing that everything can be known from a variety of perspectives leads naturally to a more balanced, less dogmatic, and so to speak, less violent understanding of reality. On the other hand, one-sided, fanatical, absolutist views, especially when joined to political ideologies, lead to terrible violence. And so, commitment to non-violence, ahimsa, requires epistemological respect for all points of view. This respect, which is based on the non-absolutist nature of reality, allows dialogue and reconciliation in the quest for truth. From a metaphysical perspective, Jainism can be viewed as transforming the principle of ahimsa embodied in the respect for the life of others into epistemological respect for the views of others, thereby establishing a basis for reconciling conflicting ideological claims. As a principle of non-dogmatism, Anekantavada rejects, to take a canonical example, both the view that existence is only inherently enduring and the view that it is only constantly changing, because each of these views, taken separately, is ekanta, or one-sided, and therefore only partially true. Anekantavada, however, respects the partial true in each view and recognizes that when seen as a partial truth, these views can be combined so that the point of view from which each is true is preserved. Epistemological respect for the views of others, however, is not relativism. It does not mean conceding that all arguments and all views are equal. It means that logic and evidence determine which views are true in what respect and to what extent. This is a middle way between absolutism and relativism, and I would call it perspectivism. Now, how is epistemological respect for the views of others established in Jainism? It is established through the use of the epistemological theory of viewpoints, or Nyayavada, and the scheme of qualified predication, or Syadvada. Nyayavada recognizes that ordinary knowledge claims are always limited by the particular standpoint on which they are based. So claims from one perspective must always be balanced and complemented by the claims from other perspectives. Syadvada recognizes that all knowledge claims need to be qualified in various ways because of the many-sidedness of reality and the limitations of any standpoint of knowledge. According to Jaina philosopher Akalanka, Nyas, or standpoints, are the presuppositions of researchers embodying the points of view from which they are investigating the thing in question. The ordinary investigator necessarily sees the thing from a particular point of view. Consequently, the nature of the thing that is revealed to him is necessarily conditioned and limited by this particular point of view, enabling him to have only partial, incomplete knowledge of it. Thus, Nyas, or standpoints, serve to categorize the different point of view from which reality might be investigated. For example, when one assumes the perspectives of other life forms, such as animals or plants, it is possible to see and feel their connectedness to us, and to feel their suffering when they are injured. Knowing how much like us they are, and knowing that they are as dependent on their environment as we are, we have incentive not to injure them and to not destroy them or their environment. As to Jaina's scheme of qualified predication, or Syadvada, it is a kind of model logical theory that follows theory of Nyayavada. In Sanskrit, Syat is often used to mean maybe, as an alternative lying between yes and no. Thus, Syat transforms a categorical statement into a conditional statement. Jains use this particle in a very special epistemological sense to indicate the many-sided nature of proposition. Its epistemological use transforms an unqualified categorical statement not so much into a conditional statement, but into a qualified categorical statement. Thus, Syat encapsulates the appropriate conditions that qualify a given statement, enabling the categorical statement thus qualified to have a truth value determined in accord with its correspondence with what is actually the case. Thus, relying on the principles of Nyayavada and Syadvada, Anekantavada, or the theory of non-absolutism, has the great potential to eliminate violent argument between ideological opponents by methodically both disarming and persuading them. Here we see the importance of Anekantavada in fostering a sense of non-violence or attempting to reduce violence. It is neither a thesis about skepticism or uncertainty, nor a formulation of probability, but a thesis about non-exclusive predication based on the recognition that a given thing includes a potentially unlimited number of characteristics. It is thus a method of reconciling opposites and making it attractive for persons holding opposing views to enter into dialogue and negotiate their differences, thus avoiding violent confrontations. The Jains carried the principle of non-violence to the intellectual level and thus propounded their Anekanta doctrine. Thus, the hallmark of the Anekanta doctrine was toleration. The principle embodied in the respect for the life of others was transformed by the Jaina philosophers at the intellectual level into respect for the views of others. This is, I think, a unique attempt to harmonize the persistent discord and oftenly unbearable tensions in the field of philosophy, religion, ideology, and general worldview. Thank you.
very much, Professor Pugwash, for emphasizing the principle of non-violence in Jainism, but also mentioning the golden rule, as we said before, and also the suffering of other living beings, such as animals, plants, the nature. And I think it's also very important that we acknowledge that also the other living beings and their suffering and how we want to.
Question.
Okay.
John.
Can you please, yes?
It says, is Jain epistemology a pre-science insight of Heisenberg uncertainty?
What?
Come here, please.
Yeah.
Once again.
Heisenberg. Well, I would not think so, because Jains did not claim that the complete knowledge of a thing is something that cannot be reached, but only that every researcher has that researchers generally are not aware that when they make a statement or proposition about something, that they're doing that from certain perspectives, or standpoint of which they are not aware usually. So ideally, when we could gather together all these different standpoints from which a proposition could be made, then we would have a certain knowledge of a thing. Yeah? So there are, on the other way, the idea of uncertainty could be compared to some Buddhist epistemological positions, but it's not subject matter of this presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much once again. I suggest that we continue with the last speaker, Mr. Almir Pehlic, canon theologian, poet, Reformed Episcopal Church in Croatia, with the topic World Peace and Necessary Sacrifice. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm a modern guy. I don't use paper because that's bad for the environment, so I use lithium batteries. Yeah, progress, right? Okay, so I would like to say one thing first. There is a thin line between a speech and a hostage situation. So I'm going to be short today because this is a peace conference and I don't want to hold you guys hostage here with my long talks and speeches. So if we look at the Holy Scripture, the Bible, we will see Jesus talking about peace, right? So we all know that Jesus loves to talk about peace, and that's great because we like to listen about peace. So there is this interesting quote that we all know, and it goes something like this. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Right, so we all know this, and we are going to say, yeah, I agree. This is amazing, right? There is another quote from the Gospel of John, and it goes something like this. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I have overcome the world. So there is peace, but within Christ, within God, but not really in the world, right? So that's a problem a bit for us. This is a peace conference, right? World Peace Conference. And there is this other thing that is kind of scary to hear, but it's also Jesus, right? And it goes something like this. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. All right, so that sounds a little bit scary. So what does this mean? It means that, yeah, there is peace in this world, but there is also possibility of not being peace in this world. So the role of ourselves is to try and create peace around ourselves. You know, world peace is a very difficult construct, and it is a construct to talk about. Only two kinds of people are willing to put a finger on it and discuss it. The first group is scientists and academics. The second group is candidates for Miss Universe. And I believe that I belong to a first group. Am I right? I hope so. As a theologian and as a poet, I decided to tell you a story, a biblical story about Eden, about the Garden of Eden, right? So everyone knows that story. It's about the world. God created world, earth, cosmos, right? And it was great. It was good and it was peaceful. There was always peace. He created the animals. We all know this mythology, right? We know this mythos. He created humankind. He created Adam, and Adam was in the garden, and it was amazing. It was peaceful. And one day, God thought, you know what? Adam needs someone here. He needs a wife. He needs a woman. So he got a woman for himself. They were a companion. It was great. But then another thing happened. There was this tree in this weird, peaceful garden. And Eve was strolling around one day and she saw the tree and she said, wow, this is amazing tree. Oh no, but God told me I cannot take the fruit from this tree because I am going to die. There is going to be fight between me and God because God said, no, don't do that. But I really like this fruit. What did she do? She took the fruit. She ate. And then Adam came and she was like, hey, Adam, my dear husband, would you like to try? And he said, no, I cannot do that because God is going to be mad. There is not going to be peace between me and God anymore. And she's like, come on, try it. And he tried it. They both fell. Where? To chaos, to conflict, to war. If you remember what happened next is that Adam started to hide from God. Eve, together with him, they were hiding from God, and they were even pointing fingers to each other. The woman told me that I can take it, the fruit. So we have an offense against God first, and then offense against each other. So we basically have two wars here. And the world was created as good. When God created it, it was good. So what happened there? Why did it become bad? Why did they fought, Adam and Eve, the husband and wife? Something happened there. Adam chose ego, himself, over his wife, the world, and God, over peace. He chose himself. But God was kind of good guy. You know, God is a good guy. So he said, you know what? You cannot live here anymore because you're not peaceful enough. You want war, you want to fight with your wife and with me. So I am going to let you out of the garden. But God did one thing first. Before they left the garden, God took an animal that he loved, that he cherished, and he killed the animal. And he took the fur or the animal skin and he gave it to the Adam and Eve so they don't die in the cold outside of the garden. So what we have here is the first sacrifice. So there is something that God did to protect human being, and that was first sacrifice. Sacrifice is a symbol how much we care about each other. God made this as a symbol that he cares about human being. Yes. If we look some other stories like Cain and Abel, yeah, again, we have idea of sacrifice. Abraham and Isaac, when Abraham needed to sacrifice his own son to prove how much he loves peace. You know, the sacrifice is also a symbol of making peace with God. And Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son to make peace on this earth. sacrifices of Israel. We all know about the sacrifices that they were doing every year, all the time, just to make peace with God and with each other and peace on this world. Sacrifice is necessary for peace between humans and God. And sacrifice is necessary between us. And if you're married, if you have spouse at home, you know that that is true, right? You know that if you have a quarrel, some kind of fight in your family with your wife or husband, you know that you will have to make some sacrifices. You know that you will have to talk. You know that you will have to sacrifice your ego, something that you love. There are small sacrifices, like take out the trash, do things you said you're gonna do, or just talk to him or to her. And there are also these big ones, to die to yourself, to your ego. You need to sacrifice your preferences. We live in a time of wars. Again, after World War II, after the homeland war in Croatia, we're again in this weird era of humankind where we want to kill and destroy again each other, like we didn't do that before. We look at Europe, at Russia and Ukraine, and we are praying, as we heard, yeah, we are praying for world peace. But my question is, what are we willing to sacrifice to make peace with each other and with God? What are Europeans willing to sacrifice? We see Germany, we see their economy. What are they sacrificing? Is Ukraine willing to sacrifice 20% at least of their territory? Couple of millions people died there. Are they willing to sacrifice them and say, you know what, Russia, we are going to give you this 20%. We are going to sacrifice ourselves just to give you that so you can have peace and I can have peace and Europe will have peace, or the world, right? We're talking about the world peace. What is Russia willing to sacrifice? What is European Union going to sacrifice? Because we are going to sacrifice something. What is USA going to sacrifice? 2 days ago, we heard Donald Trump talking about how he's going to rule North America. What is he going to sacrifice? We never heard what he's going to give to make peace. So as a religious leader, as a canon theologian, as a doctor of theology, I think that we should go back to the scripture. If you are Christian, of course, and we should read it and see that sacrifice is necessary. No amount of money is going to bring in peace. Okay, we need to understand that we need to sacrifice something that is very dear to us. At the end of the history of salvation, the story of salvation, God gave his only son, sacrificed him to bring peace to the world. So that is the gospel story, and this is my lecture for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for emphasizing the importance of sacrifice. I think that is a universal message, sacrificing the ego. And that is something that also people in diplomacy and when doing compromise, in dialogues, it's always a type of sacrifice, in whatever we do, but especially sacrificing our own ego and in confrontation with ourselves. In the end, we will only answer to our consciousness or to God and not to other people. So the sacrifice is to sacrifice the ego for a better, for a higher good. I think that's the universal message for all religions, for all scientists, for all academicians, diplomats, and everyone who are listening today. This conference. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our esteemed speakers for this wonderful session. We will now make a short break and return with the fourth panel. We will now proceed with the fourth session of our today's conference, fourth Security, Science and Peace Conference, entitled The Role of Media in Promoting Peace and Human Security. As we know, the media has an extremely important role in creating public opinions, sharing knowledge, educating citizens, and shaping the world of today. In this session, we will examine the current role of the media in promoting peace and human security, and what can be done to make the media an active partner in peace activities. And what I must say, this session is also for me personally important because I'm a former journalist, and I know what kind of influence and power the media has over the audience, and that is why I'm very interested in this session. We will start with Professor Miro Jakovljević, European Academy of Sciences and Arts. Miro Jakovljević is a full professor of psychiatry at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Zagreb and University of Mostar, a member of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts and International Academy for Sciences and Arts of Bosnia and Herzegovina, president and founder of the Croatian Institute for Research and Education on Mental Health, editor-in-chief of the international journal Psihiatrija Danubina. Professor Jakovljević will talk about the culture of empathy in promoting peace and security. Professor Jakovljević, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, my kind regards and best wishes to all of you. It's my great pleasure and honor to be here with you. The topic of my presentation, the culture of empathy in promoting peace and security, is in the function of the global enlightenment, global security, global peace, global humanism, and empathic civilization. Now I'd like to remind you of the words of Nikola Tesla. Peace can only come as nature consequence of universal enlightenment. What we need now is global enlightenment. Global enlightenment is very important now because we are now in position to choose between the clash of civilizations or empathic civilization, or between the mad or the step into the peace. We are mad, not only individuals, but nations also. We restrain manslaughter and isolated murders, but what of war and the so-called glory of killing all peoples? You can see, today we can see the similar situation in our world. So it's psycholinguistic play with the words. You know that the mad means insane, crazy. We called our species as Homo sapiens, but how much wisdom we practice in our life. So MAD, it's acronym for mutually assured distraction. It's related to military mental model that refers to a situation where two sides are in stalemate and neither can act without causing their own destruction. Donald Brennan conceived the acronym MAD, cynically to argue that deterrence through nuclear weapons capable of mutual annihilation was mad and irrational. But now we are in a situation that nuclear weapons can be used. The STEP acronym includes strategic empathy, involving better understanding of others and leading to compassionate society, global harmony, and empathic civilization. Transformative empathy is based on trust in strategic vision and empathic leadership that give us hope and meaning and makes the world within and around us healthier and happier. E means education for more empathic world based on ethos universalis associated with humanistic global mental health enlightenment. And public goods provided efficiently and generously by empathic leadership. Today, we need empathic transformative leadership. Obama said the problem in America was not economic deficit, but empathic deficit. That's the problem of our power. Strategic empathy enables leadership beyond frontiers and overcomes barriers with an understanding mind based on the well-functioning brain and gut axis. Peace means the power of clear vision of compassionate society and empathic civilization as a transformative idea for a better future. Empathization is a creative collective force at the core of humanity. It's our ability, but we must practice this. We must learn how to empathize. Assertivity means dealing with changes rapidly, flexibly, and ethically, but from the position, I'm okay, you are okay. Exactly. Collaboration in creating well-being for all and at all levels, guided by empathic, transformative leadership. And of course, what's important, education for empathic civilization based on ethos universalis, but involves win-win position. Now we lived in the time of the perfect crime. Media killed the truth, capital killed the ethics. That's a great problem. We live in the age of infodemia and paradox, so we must make difference between information, misinformation, disinformation, fake news. So today, the problem is that the more wealth, the less moral values, and all is commodity. Knowledge is commodity, health is commodity, life is commodity. So the truth is commodity. So today you can buy everything if you have enough money. So also we have some paradoxes. The more knowledge, the less wisdom due to empathic deficit. The more information, the less knowledge. The more conferences of peace, the more wars around the world. The more calls for reason, the less rational behavior. So we can see today a lot of irrational behavior. Što sad neće? So it seems that culture of empathy is our strategic imperative because we are living in a VUCA world, what means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, characterized also with high rate of corruption, commodification. And we are living in a time of unprecedented intellectual, technological, political, and social changes with growing clashes of civilizations. So we should ask ourselves, quo vadis homine, and consider what media can do for global mental health enlightenment in action for global sustainability, peace, and empathic civilization. So we came to the cultura animi. You know that Cicero first used that word, what means cultural soul, cultural mind. And today we can speak about several forms of cultures. The first one is, in the best one, culture for our future is culture of empathy, what means we are okay, you are okay. It's win-win communication. But we have also toxic cultures, culture of narcissism and culture of paranoidism. We are okay, others not okay. Someone must to lose, but not me. I must be winner. Others are losers because I'm better than they. So also we have culture depression. We are not okay. You are okay. It's lose-win. And we are not okay. You are not okay. It's a lose-lose position. It's nihilistic culture. Šta da radimo? Ćete mi vi onda? Culture of narcissism is the based on belief that this world is competitive and always stronger survives. Outsiders are competitors and potential enemies. If they don't serve us, they are enemies. Our rights and claims supersede the others' rights and our group. And the superior, the chosen, the elite. The culture of narcissism is characterized by deficit of empathy with stratospheric self-esteem, self-centeredness, grandiosity, and lack of caring about others. By fearlessness, ruthlessness, impulsivity, and thrill-seeking, and Machiavellistic deceitfulness and exploitativeness. Cultural parallelism is organized about the believing that life is a battle and the world is a battlefield, and no one is to be trusted. We, our group, nation, are good, others are bad and dangerous. So it's better get them first or they will get us. Someone always has to lose. So paranoid culture is organized about the concept of enemy, not competitor, enemy. Narcissistic culture is organized about competitor, competition. A few words about empathy. Empathy is the art of understanding others connected with them. Empathy is a very special way of being with another person. Its capacity to think and feel yourself in the inner life of another person is the highest form of knowledge. So empathy is our ability to enter into the world of the other person, other peoples. We can speak about personal empathy, but also about intercultural empathy, what is very important. So empathy is the invisible creative force that holds family, society, and civilization together. So empathy is a background of the mental health at all these levels, individual level, family level, public level, global level. Cultural empathy is an essential part of the new enlightenment, what we need today. It's a mental, social, spiritual, and political movement that inspires aspiration towards global human spirit, collective mind, and humanistic self, public and global mental health and peace, cosmopolitanism, and empathic civilizations instead of clashing civilizations. When we display and practice empathy in action, we send a message that we are all in this danger together. We are all walking close to the same abyss, and we need to maintain our balance and harmony together for our better future. Empathy serves as an antidote to hubris syndrome, characterized, which we can see in many politicians today. By mediating the excessive dominance of enemy images and narratives of enmity that do not correspond with or reflect the realities or complexities of the situation. Empathization is a multidimensional phenomenon based on the ability to resonate with and understand the emotional states of others. It's the capacity to understand thoughts, feelings, and behavior of others. The term is close to the term mentalizing. So in psychiatry, we have mentalizing therapy or mentalization, psychotherapy, theory of mind, or perspective taking. It's also ability to experience the feeling with affective share it with other persons or other nations, other groups. And it's the capability to respond in a caring and pro-social manner. So today we usually speak about 3 or 4 dimensions of empathy. The first one is emotional. I feel your pain. I'm compassionate with you, with your suffering. Cognitive. I understand your problem. I can enter in your shoes. Behavioral. I'm here with you and by your side. I'm here to help you to create something what's good for you and for me, for globally, for global interest. And moral, it's good to do good dimensions of empathy. There is also dark empathy, because empathy also can be misused by narcissistic people. So beneficial empathy means that progressive thoughts rest first on the value of empathy, putting oneself in other people's shoes, seeing the world through their eyes, and therefore caring about them. The second principle is acting on that care, taking responsibility by both for oneself and others, social as well as individual responsibility. And the third is acting to make oneself, the country, and the world better. These are words of George. So, what I propose is triad of empathization with reason and cooperation, makes a powerful combination that can motivate, inspire, and mobilize people to create compassionate societies and empathic civilizations instead of civilizations clashes. And media can help us. But the problem is that media divide people. It depends who pay them. And also an important message by Maria Soletz: may your empathy be a guide for others, and may the world grow more empathic with you. If you are more interested in what I was talking about, you can find it in my papers. So it's part of promoting global mental health and public mental health. And once again, to remind to Nikola Tesla, peace can only come as nature consequence of universal enlightenment. What we now is new enlightenment 2.0 for our sustainable world, which is endangered in many ways, from climate changes to the wars. And I would like to remind you that Homo empathicus, who lies within Homo sapiens, may quell the savage beast that dwells within all of us. In all of us, there is Homo empathicus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jakovljević, for your presentation and for emphasizing how empathy and the empathetic civilization must become a priority to all of us, and especially to the media. The media is now the topic of this session, and I hope that the representatives of the media, not only journalists and reporters, but also editors, will hear this message and help us all together to build a civilization of empathy. Thank you.
I'm very sorry that we have no representative of media here, because we organize International Academy of Science and Arts in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and our aim is, our goal, our mission is to promote empathic civilization in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and of course to send the message in the Balkans.
Yes, we will now proceed with one member of the, one representative of the media, and that is Ms. Una Haidari, who is a political EU journalist whose focus is on Central and Eastern Europe. She has reported for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the New Republic, The Nation, among others. She is a longtime correspondent for the organization Reporters Without Borders. Her work is supported by organizations such as the International Women's Media Foundation, the Ground Truth Projects, and others. Ms. Haidari, I think this was a good introduction in this session. So I would like you to comment and share with us your experience as a journalist, as a reporter, also from many conflict areas. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and everyone else for having me today. I hope you can hear me well. Let me know if everything's okay. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Anna. I should have said that before you walked off the podium. So I actually feel a little out of place after these fascinating and inspirational elaborations on peace, mainly because my focus of my initial presentation, and then I'm happy to take questions about some of the things that Anna mentioned, especially with regards to my reporting on the ground and stuff. But my presentation will be focused on a very direct and concrete problem regarding the challenges that media outlets face, which is indirectly related to the promotion of peace. But yeah, us journalists, we're always a bit more boring than academics and religious leaders and thinkers. My presentation will be my short elaboration will be on the challenges to editorial independence in the modern age and the lack of institutional protections for journalists and how that affects coverage. The previous speaker quipped at some point that media do not promote peace, they promote whoever pays them. And while that stings me personally to hear, it is largely true when it comes to many media outlets and journalists in the world. In the world we live today, almost every single person, from the average citizen on the street to the world's top leaders, have an opinion on the way the media should be run and what exactly they're getting wrong. In my personal experience and the experience of my colleagues, The media has been blamed for everything from the weather to the results of elections to the lack of public services to bad roads or even, interpersonal problems like the failure of marriages. Like the most common comment that you get if you ask someone on the street, like who's to blame for the situation we face, usually the response is that it's the media. And some would say that these accusations are fair, having in mind that the media are one of the unofficially one of the four pillars of power in the modern nation state. However, unlike the other pillars, namely the judiciary, the executive, the legislature were not directly elected by the people. And more importantly, apart from public broadcasters, we are not directly paid by them in the way the public broadcasters are. So in a systematic way from the national budgets of countries, people pay for media outlets through subscriptions and in other forms, but that goes into the realm of sort of private financing or commercial financing of media outlets, which is why I like to highlight today that the role of the media in the world is largely misconstrued, and the way in which it should be promoted is also largely misconstrued. Media outlets were largely conceived, or the media as such, the free press, was largely conceived as a profession meaning to serve the people. And the proliferation of media outlets, especially in the 20th century through forms of mass communication and technology and the advancement of technology, the trend has largely been to create a lack of oversight and control over the editorial policies of media outlets throughout the world. With this lack of oversight comes a lack. Sorry? Did someone say something? Oh, I thought someone asked me something. With this lack of oversight comes also a lack of I'm sorry, we're having some technical. Okay, fine. Someone turned off unmuted their microphone. I'm sorry. To get back to what I was saying. So with this lack of oversight on media outlets was also paired with the lack of financing for independent media outlets, which has created a situation today where very few media outlets are entirely and completely independent and entirely serve the purpose that they were so honorably conceived to serve. I'd like to just offer a couple of statistics because people often don't realize the amount of media outlets on this planet that don't have a stable source of financing. Because sadly, stable independent sources of financing, which exist for the judiciary and the legislature and the executive, and in the ideal sense, should free them from the constraints of materialistic or financial sways or so on and so forth, don't exist for the media in the same scale. The State Media Monitor in 2024, it analyzed over 601 state-administered or state-controlled media outlets in the world, and 84 of them had a complete lack of editorial adherence to basic journalistic or editorial policies. In 97 of those countries, the largest media companies, so the ones that reach the most people, have the most viewers, reach citizens, are owned by the government. And as we know, in all those countries, the safeguards or firewalls around public media outlets are very weak, and thus their policies are influenced by governments. If we then go to commercially funded ones, so we're talking about private TV channels, privately owned newspapers, magazines, and so on and so forth, 55% of the media organizations that were commercially funded that were not publicly funded were funded through commercial sources, and 37% were funded as nonprofits. There are countries in the world where nonprofit media outlets are more prominent, such as it actually isn't the case in Europe, which is what I thought it would be, but in Latin America in general, in South America, 29% of the outlets, these nonprofit outlets, controlled 29% of them were funded through nonprofit means, so non-government grants, grant-based reporting, and so on and so forth. But one thing we have to take in mind, while it's great that there's so many nonprofit organizations in certain part of the world. For those of you familiar, some of the best news outlets in Southeast Europe are definitely ones that are funded through nonprofit means. It is a completely unsustainable form of funding. The new U.S. president was elected 2 days ago and immediately signed executive orders which dictated the way funding would be distributed for USAID, which is a government. It's, for those of you who don't know, is a U.S. government funded international aid program, which funds a lot of media outlets in the Balkans. It funds a lot of media outlets in Ukraine. It funds a lot of media outlets, independent ones around the world. And they got yesterday, so day one, first full day of the administration, they already got a sort of cease and desist orders, basically telling them to stop continuing reporting that used terms that were unacceptable by the new U.S. government, such as gender-sensitive terms, pro-LGBT stuff and phrases or messages promoting progressive stances with regard to the LGBTQI community and so on and so forth. So this highlights the point that I'm trying to make about the instability of even these very independent and well-intentioned media outlets, that media outlets in Ukraine or in the Balkans are affected by the elections in a completely different country. And this applies to other forms of funding. I just used USAID because it was a very, very recent one. And media outlets in Ukraine are facing even more challenges due to the very specific opinions of the new U.S. government on the way the country, the ongoing invasion of the country should be handled. Now, everything I've said so far might seem very dry and unrelated to the promotion of peace, but it actually is intrinsically related to the way in which we relate to media and in which society relates to media outlets. There's a widespread consensus from the journalists who work for established and large media outlets to the freelancers who cover crises and wars. And, these are people I've worked with and we all collaborate. And there's a consensus amongst all of us that we would love to be left alone to deal with our job, to do our job, to not have to think about financing, having enough money to cover a crisis, having enough money to stay on the ground, having enough money to research or investigate stories. Many news outlets have been cutting down on their investigative desks because it's not financially sustainable to have someone work on a story for several months or even weeks on end. And so, yeah, this lack of sustainable independent funding is something that's going to be a problem and is increasingly becoming a problem in today's world. Mainly because I think society still clings to this ephemeral concept that journalists are supposed to magically keep doing their jobs and doing them well, despite the fact that people aren't buying newspapers, aren't buying subscriptions. They would rather get their news for free on TikTok, on Twitter, and stuff like that. News that isn't fact-checked, that isn't backed by journalistic standards, that doesn't even come from original sources, and so on and so forth. But this concept of the news as a quality, as a resource that people should invest money in, has, with the proliferation of social media platforms in particular, which we support. I mean, we need them, we use them for our work, has completely sort of gone down the drain. And and we really need ways in which journalists can independently do their work and not have it swayed by political zealots, by bigots, by misogynists, and most importantly, as is the topic of our event, by warmongers. I think journalists have thought about this long and hard, so I'm not just going to be here to complain. And this isn't a fundraiser for journalism, by the way. I just wanted to inject the conversation today with an aspect I think that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to independent reporting, and especially reporting that independently promotes peace, because it is, as all of our previous speakers have said, it is in the innate human interest and the interest of humankind and civilization to persistently and continuously promote peace. Yet, if we allow one of our four pillars of the state and society to not be protected, then you can't rely on us to promote peace in the way that humanity deserves it. I'd like to sort of just wrap up by giving two examples of how this was handled in, this tricky situation between financing independent news outlets and making them sustainable, independent for a long period of time. Was handled in situations where it was slightly different from the global norm. And I think one of the most interesting ones is post World War II Germany, which was one of the hubs of, as a result of the denazification process that was spearheaded and financed by the Allies. Germany became one of the biggest hubs for extremely independent, sustainably financed journalism. In order to sort of promote the messages of peace and denazification and so on and so forth, the Allies set up in every single region of Germany extraordinary radio stations, newspapers, TVs, and so on and so forth that had guaranteed funding for at least in the period that denazification and Allied control continued in that part of the world, or whether as harsh as it was or as intense as it was right after the war or not. And to this day, Germany boasts one of the most independent news scenes. It has its faults, of course, but it is extremely diverse and what's really important, extremely decentralized. Having news outlets only based in the capital can often be very detrimental to independent and thorough coverage. So besides setting up this infrastructure that exists to this day, I myself worked for a couple of German outlets that still relied on the legacy of these outlets set up right after World War II. Germany also has an innovative approach of financing its public TV channels, so they're not entirely publicly financed, as is, say, the norm in Southeastern Europe or most of Eastern Europe, but they have what is called a public-private partnership, whereby the outlet is encouraged to raise a certain amount of capital or financing on their own through ads or commercial programming, and stuff like that, stuff that doesn't affect and should not affect the news programming. And then the government matches that funding. It gives them, if they're able to raise, I'm going to just spitball a very low number, but if they manage to raise 2 million on their own within 1 year, the government matches it and gives them 2 million, encouraging both entrepreneurship and stable financing. And so that could be a model that people should consider. I mean, I've never, ever heard a politician, apart from criticizing the media, offer any sort of solution to financing it in a way that will make it more sustainable and independent. But maybe if we start talking about it more openly, this because something and obviously because people still expect so much from the media, this will hopefully become something that is talked about more openly. The last model I'd like to mention is reader-owned media. For those of us from the former Yugoslavia, this is a very familiar concept. We had worker-owned cooperatives, and this is kind of the same concept. So instead of having a media outlet that is owned by a publisher or a company, they would have the media outlet. One of them is, again, from Germany. It's Tageszeitung. It's a newspaper where the readers basically own the majority stock of the paper through their regular contributions, and they can also determine the way in which the media outlet is run. I mean, these forms of ownership are very revolutionary for some parts of the world because they don't exist in any shape or form. You either have publicly owned outlets or commercial private ones. And as Anna mentioned in my introduction, I worked with Reporters Without Borders for years, and part of various bodies of journalist associations where we fight to defend the rights of journalists who are being attacked, and politicians who are violating, mostly politicians, violating the tenets of freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. But another way to sort of change the way in which media operate, and a lot of people in the sort of on the brink of the activist and media scene, or people who work for both sides, have talked about setting up bodies of international bodies that would actually where you could report journalists for violating editorial policies, ethics, journalist ethics, media codes, not reporting conflicts of interest and stuff like that. Sort of a body that would ensure where journalists would be almost like judged by a body of their peers for violating the tenets of their profession. And this would also allow journalists the right to report their editorial boards or editors when they were being forced to do something that wasn't in line with journalistic rights. So I'll wrap it up with that, and I hope I've given you some things to think about when it comes to considering what role the media play in promoting peace. Really, my closing remark is, sadly, the promotion of peace and the encouragement of a way of thinking that does not lead us to conflict or escalations or tensions is not something, sadly, that happens as organically as we'd like it in our societies. And I think if we take if we step away from that and try to think of ways of protecting those who promote messages of peace, that we can ensure that some of the wars, conflicts, and some of the hatred and the divisions in society are happening, we could prevent them from happening in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haidari, for your presentation and for emphasizing actually how the funding sometimes has an influence not only on the media, but also on scientific organizations, on higher education institutions. So whoever is funding can steer the direction of how it is reported, how it is, what content is shared. And that is something that all scientists and academics and professors and everyone who works, but mainly also journalists and reporters and editors face when they just want to do their work and report objectively and share the truth with the audience. And of course, the freedom of the media must be a priority. A freedom to share what is truth, what is good and beneficial for the society, and also, of course, to indicate the key problems, the underlying problems. So the freedom of the media should really be a priority, a prerogative for everything that is done. And I think that is also in the interest of politicians, of decision makers, diplomats, and everyone who tries to build peace in this world and make this an empathetic civilization, and as Professor Jakovljevic said. So thank you very much, Ms. Haidari. We had one more speaker from Al Jazeera, but unfortunately he could not join us because, as this is always with journalists and reporters, some emergency occurred. So with this, we would like to close this panel and also to close this Force Security, Science and Peace Conference. So this conference was a joint event of the World Academy of Art and Science, Pugwash, Croatia, and the portal Ideje.hr. We would like to thank the Independent Union for Research and Higher Education employees for hosting this event and their continuous support. We would like to thank our esteemed speakers for sharing their extensive knowledge and experience with us. We would like to thank our audience, both here in Zagreb and also online worldwide. We hope that you will take with you many new insights and ideas on how to improve our peace activities, our security and safety, based on science, truth, ethics, and tolerance, how to inspire people to help one another, to share knowledge, live in friendship and cooperation, how to peacefully coexist on our one and only planet that we share. We hope that with this conference we made another contribution to local, regional, and global peace and security, because peace is built in small steps every day with open minds and open hearts, with the strength to learn from each other, wisdom to share and implement our knowledge, and gentleness and kindness in our actions towards others. Once again, thank you all, and see you at the 5th Conference, Security, Science, and Peace next year. Thank you.